Chapter 196. August 3rd, 10 in the morning. Ouyang Shuo reappeared in the Lord's office and began to deal with the backlog of government affairs. In the second half of July, the Wolf Mountain Mine and the North Twilight Salt Field had earned 8,100 gold coins, which Ouyang Shuo had yet to distribute. Because of this, many people had yet to receive their July salaries. Actually, there was nothing much to distribute. The finance department directly transferred 5,100 gold coins. With the development of various projects, the finance department was a little tight. 5,100 gold coins was already the minimum amount. As for the remaining 3,000 gold coins, 1,000 gold coins were added to the Mulan Town branch of the Bank of the Four Seas. The last 2,000 gold coins were used to start up the Bank of the Four Seas branch in Black Lion Town. Ouyang Shuo did not keep a single cent for himself. It was not that he did not need money, but that he had a huge fortune in his hands. It was the 120 gold grade secret manuals. A month had passed, and the price of the secret manuals continued to rise. It was already approaching the 700 gold coins mark set by Ouyang Shuo. Ouyang Shuo was prepared to sell these secret manuals in the near future. He had already decided to buy a batch of food before the price of food rose. When the price of food rose, he would sell them and earn the price difference. If you remember correctly, the market price of food had risen to 30 copper coins per unit at its peak. It had increased by 3 times. After deducting the 10% transaction tax, the cost of storing food, and the waste caused by transporting it back and forth, he could still get a return of 250%. This was much more affordable than the price of the secret manuals. Ouyang Shuo had already ordered the construction department to build a huge granary in the western suburbs of the city. It was used to store the purchased food. After a month of construction, the Southwest University China Hall had basically taken shape. The 3 academies had also been established and were beginning to recruit students. All that was left was the construction of ancillary facilities so that teaching activities would not be affected. According to Ouyang Shuo's instructions, all government officials in the 3 affiliated territories, except for a small number of civil officials, had to continue their education at the Southwest University China Hall. For this reason, the administration department had specially formulated a rotation training system for officials at all levels. This ensured that the departments could operate normally and that all officials would receive at least a month of paid education in the coming year. The finance department head, Cui Ingyu, took the initiative to study business at the School of Confucianism. It was foreseeable that in the near future, the officials of Shanghai County would once again be promoted. In addition, the Department of Physics also recruited skilled talents, completely breaking the low status of craftsmen in ancient times and raising the status of craftsmen in the territory. A large number of carpenters, farmers, fruit farmers, and other talented people were recruited into the Department of Physics to learn modern knowledge. This matter caused a huge uproar in the territory. Fortunately, there were no established clans or forces in the territory. Most of them were ordinary citizens, which was why this policy could be implemented. Apart from that, the official clinic had also officially started operating. In the afternoon, when Ouyang Shuo was dealing with government affairs, he suddenly heard a system announcement. System announcement. Congratulations to player Killer Wolf for becoming the 9th Lord of a Level 1 county in the China server, rewarding 600 merit points. System announcement. Congratulations to player Killer Wolf for becoming the 9th Lord of a Level 1 county in the China server, rewarding 600 merit points. System announcement. Congratulations to player Killer Wolf for becoming the 9th Lord of a Level 1 county in the China server, rewarding 600 merit points. The most exciting part of Azura Town's advancement was the dragon-seeking acupoint search. His dragon-seeking town had already fulfilled the basic conditions for applying for advancement, and the city walls had already been built. The only thing he was worried about was the lack of troops. According to the dragon-seeking acupoint search, the current dragon-seeking town, including the subsidiary territory, only had an army of 2,500 people. How could he dare to apply for advancement rashly? However, Azura Town's advancement meant that there was only 1 spot left in the top 10 of the China server. If he hesitated any longer, it was very likely that others would beat him to it. At this time, only Ouyang Shuo could help with the dragon-seeking acupoint search. Without needing Ouyang Shuo to say anything, the dragon-seeking acupoint search proposed that as long as Ouyang Shuo was willing to help dragon-seeking town successfully advance, he would allow the Bank of the Four Seas to set up a branch in dragon-seeking town. The reason why the dragon-seeking acupoint search was so anxious was to fight for the honor of being in the top 10 of the China server. This honor should not be underestimated. If used well, it could bring tangible benefits. Putting everything else aside, just being on the territory ranking could greatly increase Dragon-Seeking Town's fame. It would be easier for Dragon-Seeking Town to recruit elite players in the future, and it would even become more attractive to historical figures. Ouyang Shuo pondered. To help Dragon-Seeking Town advance, he had to start with money and materials. With money, Dragon-Seeking Town could expand its army, and with materials, namely weapons and equipment, the combat power of the army could be increased. In the end, Ouyang Shuo and the Dragon-Seeking Acupoint Search reached an agreement. 1. Shanghai County would set up a branch of the Bank of the Four Seas in Dragon-Seeking Town, and the initial reserve would not be less than 5,000 gold coins. Dragon-Seeking Town would be responsible for the construction of the bank, and Shanghai County would guarantee that the funds would be in place within 3 days. 2. Shanghai County would sell 1,000 Tang swords and 1,000 composite bows to Dragon-Seeking Town at the previously agreed price, which was 5 gold coins for a Tang sword and 10 gold coins for a bow, for a total of 15,000 gold coins. The funds would automatically be converted into a commercial loan of the Bank of the Four Seas for a year. Based on the monthly interest rate of the Bank of the Four Seas commercial loan of 3%, the monthly repayment would be equal to the principal and interest. The monthly repayment would be 1,490 gold coins, for a total of 17,880 gold coins, and the total interest would be 2,880 gold coins. This was because the progress of the game was much faster than the real world. Therefore, the monthly repayment here was basically equivalent to the annual repayment. A 1-year loan was equivalent to a 12-year loan in the real world. When a loan rose to 10,000 gold coins, the profitability of the Bank of the Four Seas began to show. Ouyang Shuo was not worried that Dragon-Seeking Town would not be able to repay the loan. After all, after the promotion to a county town, it was still possible to squeeze out more than 1,000 gold coins a month. Of course, it was not hard to imagine that Dragon-Seeking Town would have a hard time in the coming year. On the second day after signing the agreement, Ouyang Shuo rushed to the market and began to sell the manuals in his hands. In the market, the gold-level manuals of genuine quality were still in short supply. This was because the cultivation of genuine quality manuals required a lot of time. For example, Ouyang Shuo's Inner Canon of the Yellow of the Arch took him 2.5 months to reach the 3rd level at the end of July. As for the 8 Extremities Fist Scripture and the Yang Family Spear Scripture, it also took him 2 or 3 months to reach the next level. And this was under the condition that there was someone to guide him, otherwise the progress would be even slower. Therefore, the higher the level of the manuals, the better it would be for him to start cultivating. The slightly ambitious players, including some high-end players, especially the figures in the top 10 guilds or big forces, would set the threshold for their cultivation of genuine quality manuals at the gold level. It would be a waste of time to cultivate below the gold level. Therefore, this was the best period for the sale of gold-level manuals. In the second year, some players would set their sights on the king-level manuals of a higher level. Ouyang Shuo first sold the manuals one by one, setting the price of each at 700 gold coins. As expected, as soon as he put them up for sale, they were immediately bought. With Ouyang Shuo's sale, the news of a large number of gold-level manuals appearing in the market immediately spread, attracting more players to come and buy. Wow, have you heard? A batch of gold-level manuals with real names suddenly appeared in the market. You're behind the times. Look, I've already bought one. Damn, you're really rich. You're a tycoon. Sigh, this money was pooled together by a group of friends. In the next few months, we'll have to eat pickled vegetables. In each of the big guilds, There were people in charge of monitoring the market at all times. Therefore, they were the first to react. The merchants of the various guilds did not dare to be negligent and immediately reported to the higher-ups of the guilds. This was because merchants could not make decisions on their own for transactions that exceeded a certain amount. After the leaders of the various guilds heard the news, they immediately began to raise funds. The ability of guilds to make money was still very terrifying. If they really gathered their funds, as long as each member contributed 1 gold coin, they would be able to raise tens of thousands of funds. Of course, this kind of thing could only be done once. Otherwise, the cohesion of the guild would disappear. At the current stage, the players who could take out 1 gold coin were all core players. Newbies who had just entered the game could not even take care of their own food and clothing. How could they have extra funds? Seeing that the sales were good, Ouyang Shuo sold 20 manuals in a row. He quietly raised the price of each manual to 705 gold coins before smoothly selling another 20 manuals. At this time, most of the independent players had already withdrawn from the competition. The remaining ones were all big guilds or big factions. As for the remaining 80 manuals, Ouyang Shuo simply packaged them up and sold them. Every 5 manuals was sold for 3,550 gold coins, and each unit was 710 gold coins. Ouyang Shuo's sale was strategic. He did not sell them all at once. Instead, he sold them every half an hour or so. The time interval between each sale was not the same. This made the buyers unable to figure out his bottom line. Just how many manuals did he have left, and whether this would be his last sale? All the way until noon, Ouyang Shuo still had 40 manuals in his hands. At this time, Ouyang Shuo no longer put up orders. Instead, he turned around and left the market, returning to the Lord's mansion for lunch. The bustling sale of manuals seemed to have come to an end just like that. The factions that did not manage to get the manuals were extremely vexed. The reason they lost was because the speed at which they raised money was too slow. After resting at noon, Ouyang Shuo once again leisurely walked to the market. This time, he simply made an order of 10 manuals. Each order was sold for 7,200 gold coins, which was equivalent to a unit price of 720 gold coins. The merchants who had been staring at the market and were on the verge of despair were wild with joy when they saw Ouyang Shuo's orders. They did not even need to inform the higher-ups of the guild and directly bought the manuals. Just like that, the remaining 40 manuals were sold out in less than half an hour. To be continued. Chapter 197. In the end, the 120 manuals that Ouyang Shuo had hoarded were sold for a total of 85,300 gold coins. After deducting the 10% transaction tax, he had earned 76,770 gold coins. The cost of these manuals was only 6,000 gold coins. The return on investment was more than 10 times. Ouyang Shuo had thought of sending a batch of manuals to his aunt to avoid the transaction tax. However, when he thought that his aunt would definitely bargain with him, he decided not to do so. In Ouyang Shuo's plan, he had to find an Emperor-grade manual for his aunt. Even if he were to sell these gold-grade manuals to Snow Rose, they would only be used by the guild's core members. Ouyang Shuo did not have any feelings for them, so there was no need for him to be a good person. Ouyang Shuo's crazy selling was not the players who did not manage to buy the manuals, but Feng Qingyang. Jinsha County, the Overlord's office. Little sister, are we really not selling? Look, that guy raised the price of the last batch of manuals to 720 gold coins each. If we don't sell, I'm afraid the market will be saturated. Feng Qingyang was anxious. Sitting opposite Feng Qingyang was his younger sister, Feng Qinghua. Feng Qinghua looked calm. Don't worry, big brother. According to my prediction, the price of the manuals will definitely rise to more than 800 gold coins. As for the market saturation that you mentioned, there's even less to worry about. Didn't you see that the other party sold out all 120 manuals in less than a day? This shows the purchasing potential of China. Taking a step back, even if the market is temporarily saturated, it's because this batch of funds has been swept away by the other party. After a period of time, when the funds are sufficient again, the price of the manuals will definitely rise again. You must know that gold-grade manuals are the most important hurdle. If the level is too low, the players won't be satisfied. If the level is higher, the players won't be able to afford it. Therefore, it won't be outdated for a long time. If Ouyang Shuo heard Feng Qingyue's analysis, he would definitely feel that she was his confidant. He could not help but feel that Feng Qingyue's foresight was indeed unique. All right, I believe you. Feng Qingyang chose to compromise. It was obvious that he trusted this sister of his. Ouyang Shuo held the largest sum of funds ever since the game was launched. Of course, he wouldn't leave such a huge sum of money in his storage bag to rust. Ouyang Shuo took out 5,000 gold coins and prepared it for the Bank of the Four Seas in Longshuan Town. He then transferred the remaining 1770 gold to the Bank of the Four Seas as reserves. That's right, in Ouyang Shuo's eyes, the current 1,000 or 2,000 gold coins were just spare change. Apart from keeping 10,000 gold coins in reserve, the remaining 60,000 gold coins were all used to purchase food. The partner was naturally the Chui Merchant Group. Chui Yingyo's cousin, Chui Shoren, was in charge of liaising with Shanghai County. An order like this wasn't a small amount to the Chui Clan Merchant Group. Chui Shoren could not imagine that a small county like Shanghai County could possess such a strong financial power. It had only been a month since they started working together, yet their transaction had already exceeded 70,000 gold coins. It was truly incredible. Initially, the Chui Clan Chamber of Commerce was only willing to cooperate with Shanghai County out of consideration for Chui Yingyu. Presently, the Chui Clan Merchant Group had really started to take this cooperative partner seriously, and they were placed on an even more equal position. According to Chui Shoren, perhaps the silent Shanghai County would become an opportunity for the Chui Clan Merchant Group to soar once again in the future. Chui Yingyo's accident was an enormous blow to the Chui Clan Merchant Group. The loss of goods was secondary when the clan's caravan suffered a robbery. More importantly, it was a blow to the merchant group's reputation. In that incident, the Chui Clan Merchant Group had lost over 100 core members, and the senior managers had lost over 10 people. Not to mention that the whereabouts of the Chui clan's eldest young miss was unknown. Chui Yingyo's reappearance was a new turning point for the Chui Clan Merchant Group. In order to repay the Chui Clan Merchant Group, it was also to deepen the sincerity of the cooperation between both parties. Ouyang Shuo had also intentionally vaguely revealed his judgment of the food market in the next 3 months to Chui Shoren. As for how much profit the Chui Clan Merchant Group could obtain from it, it would depend on how much confidence they had in Ouyang Shuo and the courage they had to do business. Ouyang Shuo couldn't decide that. The Resource Division took an entire 3 days to transport 60 million units of food from the market to the huge granary that had just been built in the western suburbs of the city. Many people in the territory were puzzled by Ouyang Shuo's actions. They couldn't understand why their lord would purchase such a huge amount of food in one go. Ouyang Shuo couldn't explain too much about this. In any case, the purchase of food didn't come from the territory's financial revenue. Even if they were puzzled, they didn't stop him. As for players like Sun Xiaoya, they didn't know much about Shanghai County or the management of the territory. They didn't have any idea about the amount of food. This was the so-called the expert knows the ropes, while the layman just enjoys the show. During this period, Ouyang Shuo rushed to dragon-seeking town with 1,000 Tang sabers and 1,000 composite bows seized from Operation Wildfire. He even specially attended the opening ceremony of the Bank of the Four Seas branch in Dragon-Seeking Town. With Ouyang Shuo's support, Dragon-Seeking Town expanded its army by 2,000 people without hesitation. The next day, they submitted an advancement application to the system. On the 10th of August, Dragon-Seeking Town would be besieged by bandits. Taking advantage of this period of time, Dragon-Seeking Town arranged for Qin Xiong to lead the troops to frantically suppress the bandits. This was to train the newly formed troops and ensure that they would have the strength to fight when defending the town. Of course, Wang Yuanfeng and his 3 bows and 8 bull's bed crossbows were free reinforcements for Ouyang Shuo. This was a treatment that every member of the Shanghai Alliance could enjoy. Now, the number of 3 bows and 8 bull's bed crossbows in Shanghai County had increased to 5. This was also the reason why Dragon-Seeking Town was so eager to apply for advancement. While Dragon-Seeking Town was busy promoting its territory, Ouyang Shuo was paying attention to the movements of the nomadic tribes while he was busy with another important matter. According to the memories of his previous life, the second battle would be triggered when the 10th level 1 county was born in the game. Ouyang Shuo had been preparing for this battle. This was only the final sprint. Lei Sun of the military intelligence had investigated the movements of the nomadic tribes that Ouyang Shuo was concerned about and reported to him one after another. It had been more than a week since Operation Wildfire. The news that the western part of Sky Border Town had been destroyed by foreign enemies had already spread to all the tribes on the grassland. There were many different opinions about the enemy this time. Some said it was the work of bandits. Whether it was the surviving warriors of Sky Border Tribe or other people who were lucky enough to encounter the enemy, they all pointed out that the enemy was wearing the clothes of bandits and behaved perversely. Some said it was the work of a certain tribe and that the bandits were just a cover. The tragic course of the battle had already been investigated by all parties. The leaders of the various tribes generally believed that the bandits did not have such meticulous tactical arrangements. There were also people who believed that it was the work of the feudal lord. The person who held this view was the former commander of the western part of the town, Lake San, who had been sent to prison by Monk and could be seen through at any time. On the day that Lake San returned to the headquarters, he was relieved of all his duties by Sky Border Tribe's Khan Monk and sent to prison. Whether or not Lake San could walk out of prison alive depended on Monk's mood. In the face of such a crushing defeat, although there was the element of surprise from the enemy, it was also a fact that Lake Shan's command was not good and he was impulsive and reckless. Therefore, Lake San confessed to his crimes and was willing to die to atone for his crimes. Perhaps only God knew what happened in the Khan's tent that night. They only knew that although Lake San was sent to prison, Khan Monk did not say when he would execute Lake San. Just like that, he was left hanging. The impact of the destruction of the western part of the town on the grassland was slowly becoming apparent. This time, it was no longer as lukewarm as the Dawn operation. The most direct thing was that the middle-sized tribes in the west started to become restless. Without the restraint of the western part of the town, these middle-sized tribes were no longer willing to be restrained by the Sky Border Tribe. The small tribes were naturally terrified and uneasy. The Sky Border Tribe had always been their great backer. Now that their backer had lost an arm, the key was that they did not even know who the enemy was. Would such a backer still be able to protect them? If the small tribes were sheep, then the middle-sized tribes were hungry wolves. As for the Sky Border Tribe, they were lions on the grassland. The lion intimidated the wolves and protected the sheep. Now, the lion was injured and the wolves surrounded them. Although the wolves did not dare to attack the lion, they could at least extend their claws to the sheep at the side. Within the Sky Border Tribe, the enthusiasm for battle was also high. The Sky Border Tribe had been a lion for decades. Their complex as the king of the grassland had long been deeply rooted, and they could not tolerate the provocation of other tribes. For the defeat in the western part of the town, the tribe generally pointed the finger at the middle-sized tribes in the west. They suspected that they colluded with the bandits and directed this incident. The reason was very simple. The direction in which the bandits retreated was to the west. After the incident, Monk had sent the Khan's personal guards to chase after the enemy's tracks along the way. However, according to the commander of the personal guards, Bori Taichina, when they chased to the western wilderness, they completely lost traces of the enemy. It was as if they had disappeared into thin air. How did such a large number of bandits disappear with tens of thousands of horses? There was no need to think. There must be a tribe or even a few tribes that were covering for them. Even Monk could not suppress the desire for revenge within the tribe. On the contrary, the middle-sized tribes in the south, east, and north were collectively silent. Monk knew very well that this silence was only the final calm before the storm. Therefore, he tried his best to suppress the warlike faction within the tribe and temporarily did not want to start a war with the tribes in the west. Otherwise, if there were any mishaps, it would truly be beyond redemption. To be continued. Chapter 198. The grassland today was like a pile of dry firewood that could be ignited with a single spark. Before the prairie fire could burn, the market outside of Yi County quietly prospered. In the past few days, there have been herdsmen of unknown identities bringing large numbers of sheep, furs, and even horses to the market. They wanted to use these resources to trade for food and ironware with Yi County. Food was fine, but ironware was a restricted item. The county magistrate of Yi County, Zhou Haichun, did not dare to make a decision on his own. He immediately sent a letter to the headquarters to ask the Lord for instructions on how to deal with it. Ouyang Shua's strategy was to drag the nomadic tribes into the whirlpool of war. In this way, they could not only reduce the threat they posed to Friendship County, but also profit from it. Needless to say, these mysterious buyers were definitely sent by various tribes, and most of them were from medium-sized tribes. They wanted to exchange for food and ironware. Even a fool would know what they wanted to do. Therefore, Ouyang Shua noted on the official letter that iron tools could not be directly traded, but he relaxed the restrictions on iron ore, allowing iron ore to freely circulate in the market. Ouyang Shua wasn't worried that after the iron ore flowed into the nomadic tribes, it would bring about a calamity. The growth of the nomadic tribes was far slower than the development of Shanghai County. By the time the grassland calmed down again, Shanghai County might already have the strength to crush them. A mere iron ore was nothing to them. Last month, when 9-Line was leading the team to map the territory, they discovered another iron mine 20 kilometers west of the territory. The Supplies Reserve Department had already arranged for miners to excavate the new mine. The new iron mine was only 10 kilometers away from the Friendship River. Iron ore will be transported by both land and water. They were first transported to the riverbank by wooden oxen, and then transported to the docks of Shanghai County by special boats. As a result, Shanghai County no longer lacked iron ore. Ouyang Shua also wrote down in the official letter that when trading with the nomadic tribes, the grain would be sold at twice the market price, which was 20 copper coins per unit. The iron ore would be sold at 3 times the market price, which was 300 copper coins per unit. Ouyang Shua wasn't doing this to take advantage of the situation. First of all, there were signs of fluctuations in food prices. It was estimated that by the end of August, prices would start to rise. At this time, if they were to use the price of 10 copper coins per unit, wouldn't that be a huge loss? As for iron ore, it was a controlled commodity, so naturally, the price had to be raised. He couldn't possibly say that Shanghai County was a lay phone, a free porter for the nomadic tribes, right? Confiscating their duties was already the most benevolent thing they could do. After obtaining Ouyang Shua's approval, Zhou Haichun was full of enthusiasm. Yi County worked together with the Supplies Reserve Department to unload the iron ore directly at the Yi County pier and transport it to the market to be sold. On the 10th day of the 8th month, Longshuan town was besieged by bandits. Ouyang Shua didn't go to watch the battle. Instead, he patiently stayed in his territory and dealt with government affairs. At 6 o'clock in the evening, Ouyang Shua heard the system announcement. System announcement. Congratulations to player Dragon Seeking Acupoint for becoming the 10th Lord of a Level 1 county in the China server, rewarding 400 merit points. System announcement. Congratulations to player Dragon Seeking Acupoint for becoming the 10th Lord of a Level 1 county in the China server, rewarding 400 merit points. System announcement. Congratulations to player Dragon Seeking Acupoint for becoming the 10th Lord of a Level 1 county in the China server, rewarding 400 merit points. Originally, this kind of system announcement would not be able to attract the interest of the players. However, following this system announcement, another system announcement appeared. System announcement. China has successfully promoted 10 county territories, triggering the battle system. The second battle, Mai's battle, will officially begin in 3 days. Please look forward to it. Friendly reminder. The Battle of Mai is a non-mandatory battle scenario mission. Only territories at the township level and above are eligible to participate. Compared to the first battle of Zhuolu, the players were no longer clueless about the battle. The Battle of Zhuolu fully proved that participating in the battle was a huge gamble. The weak were prey to the strong. A powerhouse like Shanghai Town naturally made a lot of money. However, for ordinary players, the gains did not make up for the losses. Not only were their troops few in number, but their quality was also poor. They were unable to take the initiative in the battle. In the end, they could only be reduced to cannon fodder. Some lords excitedly brought 100 soldiers to participate in the battle. In the end, not only were they completely annihilated, but they only obtained a pitiful few hundred merit points. The input and output were completely out of proportion. Therefore, whether to participate in the battle or not was naturally up to the benevolent and the wise. Currently, there were more than 1,000 territories at the township level and above in China. In the end, no one knew how many lords volunteered to participate in the battle. Of course, for the members of the Shanghai Alliance, there was no such thing as a choice. Dragon-seeking acupuncture had just received everyone's congratulations on the Alliance channel when he received such a system announcement. He couldn't help but jump in fright. He jokingly said, "Damn, does this battle count as me starting it? Shouldn't the system give me a reward for something like this?" "Bullshit." The siege lion was indignant. "Haha, little lion, you're just plain jealous." Dragon-seeking acupuncture was rarely calm. The siege lion sent a string of speechless emojis. "Great, I can finally earn merit points." Mulan Yue was the happiest. She had been worrying about merit points. "Wui, which faction are you going to choose this time?" Bai Hua asked. The Battle of Mai, also known as King Wu's conquest of Zhou, was the decisive battle between King Wu of Zhou's allied army and the Shang dynasty's army in Mai. Because King Xin first conquered the Li in the northwest and then conquered the Dongyi in the southeast, although he won, he was militaristic and intensified social and class conflicts. In the end, he was defeated and the Shang dynasty was destroyed. This was how the history books described the Battle of Mai. However, according to Ouyang Shua's research, this battle had been overly glorified by the Confucians of later generations. The Western Zhou's destruction of the Shang dynasty and the Shang king were undoubtedly the most classic crimes of rebellion and regicide. There was no justice to speak of at all. The Battle of Mai was bloody and tragic, and it was far from how the later generations described it. It was a war where the Zhou people relied on their lofty morals to win without bloodshed. After the war, the Zhou army burned, killed, and looted in Zhaoga. There was no glorious image at all. The reason why the later generations described the battle as such was because Confucianism dominated the ideological and cultural landscape. Confucius, the originator of Confucianism, admired the Western Zhou system of rites and music. Therefore, the Confucian classics had to package and establish Western Zhou as the embodiment of justice and benevolence. Therefore, it was impossible for the Confucians to truly record the Battle of Mai, a battle where the Zhou people enforced justice on behalf of the heavens, as well as the bloody massacre and pillaging of Zhaoga. This was in line with the Confucians' motive of wiping out King Zhou's historical achievements and demonizing him, no matter what the truth of history was. Out of consideration for his own interests, Ouyang Shua announced his choice in the Alliance channel. "I choose the Shang dynasty." Mulan Yue was surprised. Bai Hua asked directly, "Wui, you want to change the outcome of history?" "That's right," Ouyang Shua said bluntly. In the first battle of Zhuolu, Lord Chunxin and Wolf Warrior had already used bloody facts to tell the Overlord players how difficult it was to change the outcome of the battle. Now, Ouyang Shua had made an unexpected decision. It was inevitable that people would be puzzled. "Wui, are you confident?" Feng Qiuhuang asked. Ouyang Shua naturally did not dare to guarantee anything. "We don't know how Gaia predicted the specific battle scene. Therefore, I really don't have any confidence. I can only say that I did some preparatory work. Whether it will be effective or not is still unknown." Ouyang Shua was speaking the truth. In his previous life, he did not participate in the Battle of Mai, so the information he knew was very limited. Preparatory work? Bai Hua acutely sensed the abnormality in Ouyang Shua's words. He said in surprise. Wooey, do you mean that you knew about this battle ahead of time? Ouyang Shua shook his head in amusement. Of course not. I'm not an immortal. Through the Battle of Zhuolu, it's not difficult to discover that the battle Gaia chose was the most important or representative battle of a dynasty. Think about it. After the 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors, it was Xia, Shang, and Zhou. In this period, was there any battle more representative than the Battle of Mai? Therefore, I previously guessed that it was very likely that Gaia would choose this battle. However, because I wasn't sure, I didn't tell everyone. Ouyang Shua's words were half-truths. He pointed out Gaia's principles for choosing battles, but he hid the fact that he knew the truth ahead of time because of his rebirth. Only then did Bai Hua feel relieved. He said with a smile, Wooey, I trust your judgment. Choose the Shang dynasty camp. I'll listen to Brother Wooey. Mu Lanyue was a black-bellied person. Of course, she would not give up on Ouyang Shua. In the previous Battle of Zhuolu, if not for Ouyang Shua, she would not have been able to achieve such a beautiful result. Ouyang Shua shook his head in amusement. I'll still say the same thing. The alliance will not force everyone to choose a camp. There's only one condition. Everyone must keep my choice of camp a secret. I do not wish for Lord Chunshin and the others to choose the opposing camp because of my existence. Ouyang Shua's words made everyone smile. Needless to say, as long as they chose the same camp as Ouyang Shua, the identity of the mutant representative would not fall to anyone else. This was naturally not what Lord Chunshin wanted to see. I still feel that following you, Wooey, is more reliable. Feng Qiuhuang also expressed his opinion. Follow Big Brother, and you'll have meat to eat. The siege lion was shrewd. He spoke concisely. Finally, only the dragon-seeking acupoint was left. This fellow thought himself clever in the previous Battle of Zhuolu and wasted a fierce general like Qin Xiong. Compared to Bai Hua, his results were much worse. After suffering a loss, the dragon-seeking acupoint finally learned its lesson and obediently said, I'll listen to Big Brother. Chapter 199. August 14th, 9 in the morning, the system announcement rang on time. System announcement. In the year 1044 BC, while the main force of the Shang army was far away in the east and Chaoga was empty, King Wu of Zhou mobilized all his troops and met up with the vassals at Mengjin Ferry. They issued a declaration of war against the Shang army and pointed their weapons at Mai. The war ended with King Xian's death. The second epic battle, the Battle of Mai, officially begins. Ouyang Shua was a first-class count and could lead 3,000 troops. The troops sent by Shanhai County included the 1st and 2nd Battalions of the Vanguard Battalion, the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd Battalions of the Mixed Brigade, the Lord's Personal Guards, and the 4 companies of the Cavalry Battalion of Poolwater County. Apart from the 2 heavy infantry battalions of the Mixed Brigade, the rest of the 2,000 soldiers were all cavalrymen, riding on turquoise warhorses. The 1st Battalion of the Vanguard Battalion and the Lord's Personal Guards were true heavy cavalry. They were equipped with radiant armor, tang swords, lances, and composite bows. They were currently the world's first-class heavy cavalry unit. As for the Heavy Infantry Battalion, they were all equipped with infantry armor, tang sabers, and shields under the haste of the armor workshop. After Ouyang Shua finished testing the conditions to participate in the battle and confirmed the number of participants, he began to choose his faction. System notice. The War of Mai has been divided into the Zhou Dynasty faction and the Shang Dynasty faction. Please choose your faction. Special note. If you choose the faction that was defeated in history and reverse the historical ending, players in this faction will receive additional rewards. Please choose wisely. Choose the Shang Dynasty side. System notification. Faction selection complete. System notice. Congratulations to player how you have clothes for activating the War Teleportation Array. 3,000 people have been teleported. 3,000 gold coins will be deducted from player how you have clothes. System notice. Teleportation has begun. After a short period of dizziness, Ouyang Shua and the others appeared in the Shang Dynasty. System notice. Welcome player not wearing anything to the Shang Dynasty's main camp, capital city, Chaoga. Compared to the shabby yellow-arched city during the Zhuolu War, Chaogo was already a very prosperous central city. The treatment of the mutants was completely different from the Zhuolu battle. After registering in the city, the court of the Shang dynasty had already set up a large military camp at the western outskirts of the city. It was specifically used to house the mutants and also provided them with rations. The players did not need to prepare their own rations. Blockhead. Ouyang Shuo turned around and was pleasantly surprised to see a young woman that was dressed like a swordsman stood not far behind him, and she had a valiant and formidable bearing. At this moment, the young woman was waving at him with an excited look on her face. In the game, only Song Jia could address Ouyang Shuo in such a manner. This was Ouyang Shuo's first time seeing Song Jia in the game. He didn't expect that Song Jia's eyesight would be so outstanding. She actually recognized him in the vast sea of people with a single glance. Compared to the virtuous lady in real life, the chivalrous Song Jia had a different kind of charm. Suppressing the excitement in his heart, Ouyang Shuo handed the horse over to Wang Feng and strode forward. He held Song Jia's tender hand and sighed with emotion. "It's great, I finally got to see you. I've been waiting for this day for a long time." The day before the battle began, Ouyang Shuo wrote a letter to Song Jia, informing her of his choice of faction. He hoped that she could join the troops of Heaven Frost Town and participate in the Battle of Mai. Song Jia's face turned red as she shook off Ouyang Shuo's hand and shyly said, "Idiot, there's someone else here." Ouyang Shuo almost fainted. They were holding hands in real life, but she didn't seem shy at all. Once women enter the game, they would really be infected by the atmosphere of ancient times. Just like Bai Hua, Feng Xiuhuang, and the others, they were all virtuous ladies. Fortunately, Song Wen helped him out at this time. He cupped his hands and smiled. "I believe this must be Brother Ouyang. I'm Song Jia's brother, Song Wen. I've admired you for a long time." He then pointed a youth dressed like a general and introduced, "This is my second brother, Song Wu." Ouyang Shuo immediately cupped his hands and greeted, "Big Brother Song." He then nodded at Song Wu. After exchanging greetings, Ouyang Shuo took the opportunity to understand the troops of Heaven Frost Town. Song Wen was only a second-rank viscount, and he had 200 troops under his command. All of them were ordinary soldiers with swords and shields, led by Song Wu. Song Wu was young and a general, so when he saw Ouyang Shuo's radiant armor, he nearly drooled. Seeing his younger brother's useless appearance, Song Wen felt a little embarrassed. However, Ouyang Shuo didn't care about it. He turned around and made a gesture to Wang Feng. Wang Feng understood and brought his personal guards to bring over 3 elite green beetle horses. Before he left, Ouyang Shuo had been thinking about what kind of greeting gift he should prepare for the Song brothers. No matter what, they were his future brother-in-law, so he couldn't treat them lightly. It just so happened that among the 5,000 beetle horses seized during Operation Wildfire, there were 20 elite beetle horses. Apart from giving one to each battalion commander in Shanhai County, there were 10 left. Ouyang Shuo made up his mind and gave each of the 2 brothers a stock of horse. As for the other one, it was naturally for Song Jia. In addition, Ouyang Shuo also prepared a set of soldier radiant armor for Song Wu. Seeing the gift Ouyang Shuo handed over, Song Wen was a little surprised. This is... The beetle horses and radiant armor of Shanhai County had been exposed by the players during the Battle of Zhuolu. It was no longer a secret. Because of this, Song Wen felt that the gift was too precious. "This is a token of my appreciation. Please accept it." Ouyang Shuo cupped his hands again. Song Wu couldn't hold back anymore. He took the radiant armor and put it in his storage bag. Then, he took the reins of the beetle horse from the guards and was about to ride it when Song Wen scolded him. "Second brother, don't be rude." Song Wen turned to look at Ouyang Shuo and said, "Brother Ouyang, you're too kind. Please forgive me for being immature." Ouyang Shuo waved his hand. "Brother Song, you don't have to be like this. I think Brother Wu is a good person. Speaking of which, I'm also a general, so I understand the infatuation a general has with a warhorse. This is their true nature." Song Wen nodded. His understanding of Ouyang Shuo deepened. In the short conversation between the two, Song discovered that Ouyang Shua's temperament was steady, neither servile nor overbearing. He was indeed not an ordinary person. No wonder he could make such an earth-shattering career in the game. Little sister's eyes were really sharp. Similarly, Ouyang Shua also had a preliminary impression of Song 1. It was indeed, as Song Jia said in her heart, he was a modest gentleman. There was not a trace of a businessman on him. "All right, the two of you, don't drop your bags here." Song Jia interrupted their conversation. Ouyang Shua and Song Wen looked at each other and smiled bitterly. Ouyang Shua began searching for the members of the Alliance of Mountains and Sea to meet up with them. Fortunately, everyone had been teleported to the same place at about the same time, so they quickly gathered together. Among the members of the Alliance of Mountains and Sea, Baiwa and Feng Xiuhuang were second-rank earls with 1,000 troops. Dragon Seeker was a third-rank earl with 500 troops. Magnolia and Sieging Lion were first-rank viscounts with 300 troops. The troops of the Alliance of Mountains and Sea, including those from Sky Mountain Town, added up to 6,300 troops. Compared to the Battle of Zhualu, their numbers had tripled. Ouyang Shua introduced the three Song siblings to the members of the Alliance of Mountains and Sea. Because it was their first time meeting, the atmosphere was a little awkward. Ouyang Shua was helpless and suggested that they leave the city and settle down in the army camp outside the city. As for investigating the famous lords of the Shang dynasty, they weren't in a hurry. In any case, all the lords would have to meet up at the army camp in the western suburbs. As soon as they walked out of the city gates, a battle announcement rang out. Battle announcement. The Battle of Mai has a total of 805 lords with a total of 102,000 soldiers. The Zhou dynasty has a total of 480 lords with a total of 60,000 soldiers. The Shang dynasty has a total of 325 lords with a total of 42,000 soldiers. As expected, not only did close to 200 lords choose not to participate in the battle, but the number of players who chose the Zhou dynasty far exceeded the Shang dynasty. Firstly, the players learned from the Battle of Zhualu and didn't dare to rashly choose the losing side. Secondly, the Zhou dynasty had a saint-ranked historical figure like Liu Shang waiting to be subdued. Liu Shang, also known as Jiang Shang, had the courtesy name Zia. Jiang Zia was the founder of the Qi Kingdom, the chief strategist of King, one of the Zhou dynasty, the supreme military commander, and the founder of the Western Zhou dynasty. He was also the founder of the Qi culture. He was an outstanding strategist, military strategist, and politician in ancient China. Throughout the ages, he had been recognized as a figure of the Confucian school, legalist school, military school, and the unhindered school. He was known as the Grandmaster of the 100 Schools. Speaking of which, Ouyang Shua had some history with Jiang Shang. The military book, 6 Stratagems, that he had obtained was written by Jiang Shang. Jiang Shang was also known as the ancestor of the military school. Wanting to easily subdue such a figure was simply wishful thinking. According to the rules of the players in his previous life, the key to subduing historical figures was to grasp their weaknesses and needs. For example, the weakness of Huang Zhong, the general of the 3 kingdoms, was his son, Huang Su. If someone could cure Huang Su's illness and satisfy Huang Zhong's greatest desire, then subduing Huang Zhong would be a piece of cake. On the other hand, Jiang Shang was already an extremely powerful official in the Zhou dynasty. Even finding his needs was as difficult as ascending to the heavens, let alone satisfying his needs. Therefore, Ouyang Shua didn't have any expectations and directly gave up on the Zhou dynasty. Battle announcement. Because the Shang dynasty's military strength is weaker than the Zhou dynasty's, according to the rules of the battle, the Shang dynasty's military strength will automatically increase by 25%. Because the game simulated a real lethal attack, there was no concept of health points. Therefore, the so-called increase in military strength referred to the increase in the toughness of the troops' armor or leather armor, thereby indirectly increasing the defensive capabilities of the troops. Battle announcement. According to the results of the Nobility and Achievement test, The mutants in the Zhou dynasty's camp will be represented by Lord Chunshin, a second-rank earl. The mutants in the Shang dynasty's camp will be represented by Don't Say Wooey, a first-rank earl. The mutants in my battle were still Ouyang Shua and Lord Chunshin. The only difference was that the two of them had switched sides when it came to choosing sides. To be continued. Chapter 200. P.S. This chapter is poisonous. Be careful. When Ouyang Shua led his troops to the barracks in the western suburbs, there were already lord players arriving. In order to maintain order in the barracks, the Shang dynasty had specially sent a team of 100 royal guards, later known as the Imperial Army, to guard the barracks. The royal guards were equipped with the most advanced bronze armor and shields of that era. They were extremely mighty. As the representative of the mutants, Ouyang Shua was fortunate enough to be assigned to the largest barracks. Furthermore, it was located in the middle of the barracks. Beside it was the royal guards barracks. After settling down, Ouyang Shua arranged for Siege Lion and Dragon-seeking Acupuncture Point to scout for information. They mainly wanted to confirm the famous lords in the Shang dynasty's camp. As for the players who came to visit Ouyang Shua, they were all led to the side by Bai Hua and Feng Qiuhuang to discuss cooperation. This was different from the Battle of Zhuolu. This time, Ouyang Shua hoped to gather as many mutants as possible. This was because he had chosen the losing side. If he wanted to turn the tables, he had to rely on the strength of a group. Within the barracks, Ouyang Shua had his own tent. Wang Feng had already led his personal guards to guard the tent. Seeing Ouyang Shua's personal guards, Dragon-seeking Acupuncture Point and Siege Lion were extremely envious. They said that when they returned, they would also form a personal guard to show off the might of a lord. Ouyang Shua ignored their teasing and invited Song Jia to his tent alone. Ever since they met, the two finally had a chance to be alone. Of course, Ouyang Shua wasn't here to talk about love. After a brief chat, Ouyang Shua took out the 9E manual from his storage pouch. This Emperor-level manual cost Ouyang Shua 1,500 gold coins. Nowadays, people would fight over it crazily even if it was sold for 30,000 gold coins. Of course, the prerequisite was that they could raise that much money. Ouyang Shua didn't mail such a precious manual to Song Jia. Instead, he wanted to give it to her personally. It could be considered a surprise, and now was the right time. Take a look at this. Ouyang Shua handed the 9E manual to Song Jia. Song Jia didn't pay much attention to it, but after she received it and saw the name on the cover, she was so shocked that her jaw nearly dropped. She exclaimed, 9E manual? Sure. Ouyang Shua signaled for Song Jia to lower her voice. Blockhead, you scare me to death. Song Jia lowered her voice. To think that you could obtain such a rare secret manual. I really have to give it to you. What do you think? Do you like it? Ouyang Shua smiled. Song Jia nodded, then shook her head and said, Blockhead, I like him. Of course I like him. However, I can't take this secret manual. It's too valuable. You should keep it for yourself. You're a great lord. So how can you not have anything useful? Saying this, he reluctantly handed the secret book back to Ouyang Shua. Ouyang Shua shook his head in amusement. This girl obviously liked him to the extreme, yet she was still thinking for him. Don't worry, I've already learned the Emperor rank inner force cultivation method, so I don't need to cultivate the 9E manual anymore. Blockhead, are you lying to me? They're Emperor-level secret manuals. Why do you say they're like cabbages on the street, one after another? I don't believe it. Ouyang Shua had no choice but to show her his status panel. A player's attributes couldn't be detected using detection. There was only one way to understand the other party's attributes. After Song Jia finished looking, she exclaimed, Blockhead, I can now confirm that you're a monster. Heavens, you've actually cultivated 2 genuine Emperor-level secret manuals and 1 genuine Emperor-level secret manual. You're really, really abnormal. Do you believe me now? Hurry up and learn the 9E manual. I'll protect you. Okay. Song Jia happily put away the secret manual and opened it. Ouyang Shua saw Song Jia begin to sit cross-legged, and he also started cultivating. 2 hours later, Song Jia opened her eyes with a smile on her face. Looking at Ouyang Shuo, who was sitting on the side and protecting her, her eyes flashed with affection. Blockhead, you're so good to me. I don't know how to repay you. Ouyang Shuo had already finished cultivating. Seeing Song Jia staring at him, he smiled playfully. What? Haven't you seen a handsome guy before? Staring at me like that, I'll be embarrassed. TCH, blockhead, you're still so thick-skinned. Song Jia laughed. In truth, the Ouyang Shuo in the game gave Song Jia a strange feeling. Looking at this calm and majestic lord, Song Jia found it hard to associate him with a hooligan in real life. Ouyang Shuo's words just now made Song Jia realize that he hadn't changed at all. He was still the hooligan. Blockhead, I just noticed that there are so many beauties in your mountain and sea alliance. Tell me honestly, have you been fooling around behind my back? After getting to know each other again, Song Jia started to get jealous. Of course, in the mountain and sea alliance, Feng Xiuhuang, Bai Hua, and Mulan, you were all stunning beauties and lords. Song Jia naturally felt uncomfortable. Her identity as the eldest daughter of the Song clan was useless in the game. Furthermore, Feng Xiuhuang was the eldest daughter of the Feng clan. How could Song Jia not feel a sense of crisis? Also, you're practicing some inner canon of a Yellow Emperor. Are you trying to start a huge harem with 3,000 women? Song Jia's jealousy grew stronger. Ouyang Shuo shook his head and knocked Song Jia's head. What are you talking about? It's just an internal cultivation technique. What do you mean by 3,000 women? Don't you have the modesty of a girl? Then tell me, what's going on with those women? I can see that you're very familiar with them. They're laughing and talking without restraint. I can't even get a word in edgewise. Blockhead, tell me honestly, do you think I'm useless? I can't even help you in the game. Instead, I make you worry. Song Jia was a little depressed. Ouyang Shuo was startled. He stood up and hugged Song Jia from behind. He wrapped his arms around her waist and pressed his face against Song Jia's delicate cheek, feeling the apprehension in her heart. Song Jia's body trembled. She was a little shy. This was the first time the two of them had such an intimate action since they met. Silly girl, how could I, Ouyang Shuo, be a playboy? I met a beautiful woman in this life, and I'm satisfied. Bai Hua and the others are just friends and confidants. There's no love affair between us. Also, don't bring up useless things in the future. We're lovers, so why we need to care about these things? What you've given me far surpasses anything material. Ouyang Shuo said with deep emotion. Song Jia's body trembled. Her face turned red, and even the tips of her ears were burning. This was the first time Ouyang Shuo had said such words to her. How could she not be moved? Song Jia turned around in Ouyang Shuo's embrace. She looked into Ouyang Shuo's eyes and earnestly said, Blockhead, remember what you said to me today. Don't let me down. Ouyang Shuo, will never let you down. Song Jia could no longer restrain herself. She threw away the modesty of a girl and took the initiative to kiss him. This kiss was for the rest of their lives. The two of them were lovey-dovey in the tent when the siege lion suddenly walked in. Seeing the scene in front of him, he couldn't help but let out a weird laugh. Big brother, my dear brother, I'm running around outside, but you're here enjoying yourself. Woo-woo. Fortunately, Song Jia was not a petty woman. In the end, she had a heroic air about her. In the face of the siege lion's teasing, she was only slightly shy. Ouyang Shuo ignored the siege lion's teasing and asked directly, How's the situation? The siege lion regained his composure and shook his head. Big brother, the situation isn't looking good. Do you know what happened? Handan, Spring, and Autumn, and Iron Blood Alliance have all chosen to join the Zhou dynasty. Ouyang Shuo was stunned. How could it be so coincidental? Could it be that someone is behind this? That's not the only strange thing. At this moment, Xuanlong Acupuncture Point walked in. After greeting him, he said, Just now I actually saw Lao AI from Handan Alliance. Lao AI? Why didn't he choose to join Handan Alliance? Ouyang Shuo didn't understand. Who knows? The siege lion's thoughts were more cunning. Do you think that Lao AI was sent by D Chen to be a spy? Spy? Communication is not allowed in the battle map. Even the Alliance channel has been shut down. How can he send messages? Ouyang Shuo still didn't understand. Haha, Big Brother, being a spy doesn't mean that you have to gather information. He can also destroy the Shang dynasty's alliance. When the battle comes, he can also avoid it. Anyway, as long as you think about it, there's a way. The siege lion was indeed full of evil tricks. Ouyang Shuo nodded and then frowned. That's not right. This way, Lao AI won't be able to do anything in this battle. Will he agree to such a big sacrifice? I feel that Big Brother is right. In my opinion, Lao AI will definitely not be happy. He might even be ostracized by Handan Alliance. If you want to find out what exactly Chu Di-chun and Lord Chun-shin are doing behind the scenes, this Lao AI is the best breakthrough point. Big Brother, why don't you try and make contact with him? His conjecture of finding the dragon's acupuncture points was reasonable. Ouyang Shuo was also confused. If he didn't get to the bottom of this, he wouldn't be at ease. All right, I'll find a chance to meet Lao AI. Looks like this game of chess is not going to be easy. Di-chun is just a useless person. Big Brother, why do you have to worry? The Siege Lion's disdain for Di-chun had not diminished. The enmity between the two was somewhat inexplicable. Ouyang Shuo shook his head. You're wrong. Don't underestimate Di-chun. Haven't you noticed that ever since Handan Town failed to advance, Di-chun rarely appears in public? What does this mean? It means that he has already realized his mistake and is starting to consciously hide himself. This kind of opponent is the most terrifying. Needless to say, after the migration, Di-chun will have a bunch of old foxes behind him. Sun Long nodded, agreeing with Ouyang Shuo's judgment. To be continued. Chapter 201. That afternoon, Ouyang Shuo met with Lao AI. The two of them didn't meet in secret. They arranged to meet in Ouyang Shuo's tent. There was no need to hide it, and there was no way to hide it. Can you tell me what Di-chun and Lord Chun-shin are plotting? Ouyang Shuo's directness gave Lao AI a fright. Why should I tell you? He asked. You mean they really are plotting something? Ouyang Shuo exclaimed. Lao AI realized that he had fallen into the other party's trap. He prepared to adjust his strategy. Yes, they are plotting something, but I won't tell you. You will. Ouyang Shuo said confidently. Arrogant. Lao AI was indignant. Ouyang Shuo smiled. Brother Lao AI, let's not beat around the bush. I think you know very well that you and Di-chun are not the same kind of people. Otherwise, you wouldn't have come to the Shang dynasty as a spy. You are ostracized and not trusted by them. This is a fact that anyone can see. Lao AI's face darkened. Ouyang Shuo's words had stabbed him where it hurt. Lao AI looked up, expressionless. Then, can I trust you? Or should I say, you, the number one Lord of China, the leader of the Alliance of Mountains and Seas, the representative of the commoner players in China. Trust me? Ouyang Shuo nodded. You have no choice. Lao AI was dejected, but he made up his mind. Let's make a deal. Speak. I'll tell you the truth, and you accept me into the Alliance of Mountains and Seas. Ouyang Shuo's eyes narrowed. He did not expect things to be so serious that Lao AI would need to seek protection from the Alliance of Mountains and Seas before he dared to speak the truth. Those old fellows were really unwilling to be left out. Old fellows, do you really think that I didn't notice? What a joke. I agree. Ouyang Shuo did not hesitate. It's actually very simple. The 6 hegemons of Handan are showing signs of reuniting. Not long ago, I happened to see the leaders of the major powers gathering in Handan. The leaders I am referring to are not Di-chun or Lord Chun-shin, but their elders, the true decision-makers of the various powers. Lao AI recalled. Indeed, Ouyang Shuo's premonition came true. The split of the 6 hegemons of Handan stemmed from Di-chun's arrogance, Lord Chun-shin's arrogance, and Feng Qiuhuang's ambition. Ouyang Shuo and Xiongba's roles were just catalysts. The 6 hegemons split into 3, and the Alliance of Mountains and Seas took the opportunity to take control. After the interstellar migration, the hegemons finally had to deal with the hegemons. The decision-makers of the major powers finally had the time to deal with the matters in the game. Clearly, the younger generation was still too emotional and had not mastered the art of compromise. At this time, the older generation naturally had to step forward and clean up the mess. At the end of the day, They would never allow the right to make decisions in China to be handed over to someone else. Ai ton lao ai to chen ai ton to was to lao lao to yang for was is he. He was more worried about Feng Qiuhuang. All the signs indicated that Feng Qiuhuang had been kept in the dark. She had no idea that the elders in her family were trying to pull strings. Is Xiongba involved? Ouyang Shua asked. Lao Ai was shocked. He did not expect Ouyang Shua to be so perceptive. He nodded. That's right. Xiongba had played a dishonorable role in the split of the six hegemons. He was the one who lured Lord Chunxin to the throne. If the six hegemons want to reunite, Xiongba must be involved. With the wisdom of these old men, it was the safest choice to take in Xiongba or the power he represented. It was killing two birds with one stone. If the Handan Alliance, Spring and Autumn Alliance, and Iron Blood Alliance were united, they would be more powerful than the six hegemons. As for why Lao Ai was abandoned, there was a reasonable explanation. They looked down on him. Di Chun had pulled Lao Ai into the Handan Alliance as a last resort. Now that he was useless, he had to be cast aside. Ouyang Shua nodded. Let's end our conversation here. We will talk about the alliance after the battle. What we need to do now is to fight this battle well. After sending Lao Ai off, Ouyang Shua did not stop at the camp. He rode back to Chaoga. Everyone in Chaoga City was anxious. News of the Zhou army's attack had spread throughout the city. The city was empty, and the imperial army was alone in the east. What could the king do to stop the damned Zhou army? In fact, there was still a week before the real battle. This was the time Gaia left for the players to complete their side characters. This time, Ouyang Shua did not have such intentions. He headed straight for the palace. A palace guard stopped Ouyang Shua. Who are you? The palace is a restricted area. Unauthorized personnel are not allowed to enter. Ouyang Shua dismounted and handed the reins to Wang Feng. He cupped his fists. The representative of the mutants is here to see the king. Please inform him. The guard checked Ouyang Shua's waist token. After confirming that there was no mistake, he entered the palace to report. Following behind the guard, Ouyang Shua did not have the mood to look around the Shang Palace. He was thinking about how to convince Emperor Xian to accept his suggestion. In the main hall of the palace, Emperor Xian was discussing with his generals about how to deal with the Zhou army. When he heard the guard's report that the representative of the mutants was outside the palace, he was immediately interested. Wu Lai was the son of Fei Lian. He was a warrior who could fight with rhinoceroses, bears, and tigers. Fei Lian was good at walking. Both father and son served Emperor Xian with their talents. They were both loyal officials of the Shang dynasty. During the Three Kingdoms period, Cao Cao called Dianwei the ancient Wu Lai. The Wu Lai he was referring to was the one in front of him. Ouyang Shua walked into the main hall and bowed. The mutants are here to see the king. Di Chun sat upright on his throne, his appearance imposing. Why have you come to see me? I'm here to help the king. Ouyang Shua was neither servile nor overbearing. How arrogant! Wu Lai was indignant. Ouyang Shua was not annoyed. He smiled and said, May I know who you are? I am Wu Lai. Don't talk big. The Zhou army is powerful, and we are empty. How can we help? Wu Lai was straightforward. He said whatever he thought. General, you are wrong. I heard that the king has already recruited 700,000 slaves. That is several times the number of the Zhou army. How can we be empty? Ouyang Shua pretended not to know. Wu Lai snorted. What do you know, kid? Those slaves have not received military training. They don't have any weapons or armor. How can they fight? Ouyang Shua nodded. Since that is the case, why not give them weapons and armor? Wu Lai's patience was running out. Emperor Xian sat on the seat of honor in silence. You don't know anything. How dare you say you want to help Chaoga? That is absurd. Ouyang Shua still smiled and cupped his fists. General, please enlighten me. Seeing that the king did not stop him, Wu Lai said patiently, Many of the 700,000 slaves are from the Zhou nation or the vassal tribes. How can we rest assured? If we give them weapons, it will be a waste of time if they change sides. Besides, even if we give them weapons and armor, what's the use if they don't go through training in a short time? Ouyang Shuo pretended to understand and said with a smile, I see. That is why I came. Emperor Xian was finally moved. What plan do you have? Tell me quickly. Your Majesty, if we want to succeed with this plan, I need you to agree to one condition. What condition? Your Majesty, please isolate the High Priest and prevent him from contacting the outside world. Ouyang Shuo's words were shocking. The High Priest that Ouyang Shuo mentioned was Wei Zi, Emperor Xian's elder brother. Wei Ziki, Wei Zhongyan, and Emperor Xian were brothers of the same mother. When Wei Ziki was born, his mother was still a concubine. After being made the queen, she gave birth to Emperor Xian. Because Wei Ziki was older, he wanted to make him his heir. According to the etiquette, Wei Ziki was born of a concubine and Emperor Xian was born of the first wife. Therefore, he made Emperor Xian his heir. Wei Ziki naturally took it to heart when Emperor Xian succeeded the throne. However, he had great patience and did not flare up. As the eldest son of the late king, Wei Zi had great influence among the royal family, high-ranking nobles, and slave owners of the Shang dynasty. In the end, he formed a powerful force with him as the leader. The king of Shang, Emperor Xian, knew the potential threat of his elder brother better than anyone else. However, the situation after ascending the throne made Emperor Xian have no choice but to rope him in. The late king was dead, but the late king's two younger brothers, Baigan and Jizi, were in their prime and were eyeing the throne. This group of people represented a large group of nobles and slave owners, forming a powerful force. Therefore, Emperor Xian decided to rope in his elder brother, Wei Zi. After eliminating the theocracy group led by the original high priest, Wei Zi became the high priest of the country. Theocracy ran through the entire history of the Shang dynasty, and the high priest was the highest theocracy leader of the Shang dynasty. His status and identity were similar to the Pope of Rome. However, the result was far more complicated than Emperor Xian had expected. After he ascended the throne, he was determined to reform. One of his major actions was to restrict and deprive the old nobles of their rights. He vigorously selected and placed talents from the lower-class commoners and even slaves. That was how he made his fortune. However, such actions angered the entire group of slave owners and nobles. From Xia to the Warring States period of more than 1,000 years, China had implemented a hereditary system of aristocratic official positions. The group of slave owners and nobles monopolized the political and economic power of the country. Emperor Xian's actions were undoubtedly going against the entire group of slave owners and nobles of the Shang dynasty. He was bound to suffer a strong backlash. In particular, the severe consumption of the country's power on the Eastern expedition was severely criticized by the ministers in the court. Many new and old contradictions gathered. In the end, the upper echelons of the Shang dynasty formed a powerful opposition aristocratic alliance with Wei Zi, Baigan, and Jizi as the core. This was an unusually strong alliance formed after a large aristocratic family that controlled military, political, and financial power colluded with the royal family that controlled theocracy. It posed an extremely serious threat to the royal power of the Shang dynasty. Moreover, Emperor Xian's character was unusually cold-blooded and cruel. It was impossible for him to compromise. In the end, the result of the showdown was that Baigan was killed and Jizi was imprisoned and exiled. At the critical moment, Wei Zi sided with Emperor Xian and protected his position. However, in reality, Wei Zi's hatred towards Emperor Xian was irreversible. He had to take revenge, and the way he took revenge was almost unbelievable in the eyes of future generations. He betrayed the country of his ancestors and colluded with the biggest enemy of the Shang dynasty, Western Zhou. It was this traitor who ordered Grand Preceptor Chang and Junior Preceptor Jiang to carry the sacrificial tools used by the royal family to worship the ancestral spirits, as well as the 9 tripod cauldrons, which symbolized the country of China and the royal power of the emperor at that time. At the same time, he brought over the political, economic, and military information of the Shang dynasty, including the turmoil of the ruling group in the country, the decline of the economy, and especially the extremely weak defense of the Shang dynasty. At the same time, he explained in detail to King Zhou the route and the time needed if the main force of the Shang army from the east wanted to return to the mainland. At this point, the Shang dynasty no longer had any secrets. They were all exposed to the Zhou dynasty. Therefore, King Wu of Zhou and Jiangshang made a prompt decision. They mobilized all the available military forces in the country and gathered the feudal lords to form a coalition army. They took advantage of the situation and attacked the Shang dynasty's capital, Chaoga, in the shortest time possible. Therefore, the tragedy of the Battle of Mai was played out. When the Zhou army attacked Chaoga, it was Wei Zi who led a group of people out of the city to surrender to the Zhou. After that, the actual ruler of Western Zhou, Zhou Gongdan, repaid Wei Zi who had helped the Zhou greatly. He granted Wei Ziki the title of Song in the old Shang dynasty, Shang Qiu, to show that he would not let the descendants of the Shang dynasty die. Thus, Wei Ziki became the ancestor of the Zhou dynasty's Song kingdom. Therefore, if Ouyang Shuo wanted to give advice, he had to first deal with the biggest traitor of the Shang dynasty, Wei Zi. King Xian's eyes narrowed, revealing a cold glint. King Xian was naturally worried about his elder brother. However, it would be difficult to imprison him. Must I? Yes. Ouyang Shuo refused to compromise. King Xian was also a decisive person. All right, I promise you. However, if your plan does not work, you should know what will happen to you. The authority of an emperor could not be challenged. To be continued. Chapter 202. After obtaining the approval of the king of Shang, Ouyang Shuo revealed his plan. To defeat the Zhou army, we have to weaken the enemy and strengthen ourselves. What do you mean? King Xian was unmoved. General Eli said that most slaves can't be trusted. Therefore, your majesty can choose 100,000 useful people from the 700,000 slaves and release them from their shackles. Let them eat their fill and promise them freedom if they win this battle. Then give them crossbows. With some training, they will be a powerful force. The strongest part of the Zhou army is their chariot army. Therefore, we can arrange for the remaining 600,000 slaves to dig trenches and cover the entire battlefield. We will definitely be able to stop the Zhou army's chariot army. Ouyang Shuo pursued the policy of elite troops. Instead of letting those slaves change sides, it was better not to arrange for them to go to the battlefield. As for crossbows, they were the easiest long-range weapons to master. They only needed 2 to 3 days. King Xian was shocked. He looked happy and then worried. Although your plan is good, the imperial court doesn't have that many crossbows for the slaves. Ouyang Shuo smiled. Although there are no crossbows, do you have hard bows? Of course. The most difficult part of a crossbow is the crossbow mechanism. I can solve it for your majesty. Your majesty, you just need to recruit all the craftsmen in Chaoga City to make the crossbow arms and assemble them together. You will be able to obtain 100,000 crossbows. King Xian was overjoyed. All right, if we win this battle, you will be the main contributor. I will definitely reward you handsomely. Ouyang Shuo was delighted. He took the opportunity and said, if we win this battle, I just need you to allow me to go alone. Oh, who is it? King Xian was very interested. Ouyang Shuo turned to look at Eli and said with a smile, General Eli. Without waiting for King Xian's reply, Eli said, if we can defeat the Zhou army, what's the harm in it? System notification. Congratulations to player who has no clothes for triggering the mission to subdue the Emperor-level historical figure Eli. Mission completion condition. Assist the Shang dynasty and defeat the Zhou army. Mission completion deadline. Before the end of the Battle of Mai. Ouyang Shuo was overjoyed. I have nothing else to ask for. Ouyang Shuo followed Eli out of the palace and headed to the military workshop in Chaoga City. As soon as he arrived at the workshop, Ouyang Shuo took out the 100,000 ballistae from his storage pouch without any hesitation. These crossbow machines were naturally the ones that Ouyang Shuo had specially ordered the archery and crossbow division to make. Now, they were finally put to use. Ouyang Shuo had paid a heavy price for the Battle of Mai. Just the cost of 100,000 ballistae would be 10,000 gold. Fortunately, the iron ore was produced in the territory, and the wages of the craftsmen were fixed. Otherwise, Ouyang Shuo would suffer a great loss. The Shang dynasty would naturally be in charge of the assembly of the crossbow. Ouyang Shuo would not participate. As for the selection and training of the slaves, DXN had already handed them over to evil. There was no need for Ouyang Shuo to worry. What Ouyang Shuo needed to do was to organize the mutants. He did not expect to defeat the Zhou army with just 100,000 crossbowmen. He had to cooperate with the frontline army and the defense troops on the flanks. It was already 5 o'clock in the afternoon when Ouyang Shuo returned to the barracks. The huge military camp with 42,000 mutant soldiers was bustling with activity. Compared to the deer-chasing war, Bai Hua and Feng Qiuhuang's reorganization of the other lords' armies went much smoother. The lords knew very well that the alliance of mountains and seas had 15% of the Shang dynasty's troops, and they were the most elite. As such, if they wanted to gain contribution points, joining the alliance of mountains and seas was the best choice. If they fought alone, they would only be cannon fodder. Apart from a few stubborn ones, most of the soldiers were willing to accept the reorganization. Ouyang Shuo followed the plan from last time, with Zhang Liao as the commander of the cavalry, Qin Xiong and Lin Yi as his deputies, Shi Wan Sui as the commander of the sword and shield soldiers, and Mu Ging as the commander of the crossbowmen. Since it was already in global mode, there was no problem for the players to go offline. As such, when night came, everyone returned to their tents to rest. On the second day, the reorganization officially began. After a morning of statistics, other than the 2,000 diehards who refused to be reorganized, the remaining 40,000 soldiers consisted of 25,000 saber and shield soldiers, followed by a total of 10,000 cavalry, and the fewest crossbowmen, with only 5,000 crossbowmen. In the next few days, the various divisions would begin training together, in case they were unable to command effectively during the decisive battle. In ancient battlefields, there were over 10,000 soldiers, and commanding was a big problem. It was a huge test of a general's ability. At the same time, the eliminated 600,000 slaves were chased out of Chaoga to Mai, where they began digging trenches. With such a huge amount of manpower, even the most spacious place would be unrecognizable. Mai was 70 leagues south of Chaoga, which was about 25 kilometers. As such, it would take a day or two for these slaves to travel. In order to prevent the slaves from escaping or slacking off, King Xin sent 500 imperial guards with them. The main force of the Shang army was in the east, and Chaoga only had 10,000 imperial guards, 6,000 royal guards, and a few war elephants. The fact that King Xin could still send 500 imperial guards at a time like this showed how much importance he placed on Ouyang Shuo's plan. He had to make sure that nothing went wrong. In the sky, where no one was paying attention, a little bird followed behind the slave troop, accompanying them all the way. On the fourth day of the Battle of Mai, the main camp of the Zhou dynasty, Mengjin. Report. A spy entered the central tent and knelt on the ground, saying loudly, "Reporting to the king, there's an important report from the front." Other than King Wu of Zhou, there was also Prime Minister Jiang Shang in the tent. "Quick, tell me." King Wu of Zhou, GFA, was a little impatient. The Shang dynasty drove hundreds of thousands of slaves to dig trenches outside my city. Their behavior is strange. The spy did not dare to be negligent. GFA was confused and turned to Jiang Shang. "Prime Minister, why did the Shang dynasty send slaves to dig trenches?" Jiang Shang stroked his beard and said with a frown, "They dug trenches to stop our chariots. It seems the Shang dynasty has a capable person to help them. Then what should we do?" GFA was shocked. The chariots were the trump card of the Zhou dynasty and the core of the strategy. If the chariots could not reach the enemy's camp, then the entire strategy could not be carried out. The only thing we could do now is to send soldiers to drive the slaves away and stop them from digging trenches. GFA nodded. "Prime Minister, who do you think we should send?" "That's the problem. Our army is limited and we can't act rashly in case we get ambushed." Why don't we send soldiers to my now and start the battle? GFA suggested. Jiang Shang shook his head. We can't do that. The feudal lords have not gathered yet. Then what should we do? GFA was anxious. Just as Jiang Shang was in a dilemma, a guard outside the tent reported, Mutant Lord Chunshin requests an audience with your majesty. Let him in, Zhou Wang said. After Lord Chunshin entered the tent, he bowed and said, Mutant Lord Chunshin greets your majesty and prime minister. Dispense with the formalities. Zhou Wang put on a courteous expression. What matter do you have to report this time? I am here to share your majesty's worries. Lord Chunshin said confidently. Oh, Zhou Wang was puzzled. I heard that the enemy is cunning. They dug trenches and might have stopped our chariots. As a representative of the mutants, I am here to request your majesty's permission to stop them. Lord Chunshin explained. Zhou Wang was overjoyed. Good. I have been worrying about this matter. Thank you, your majesty. Lord Chunshin was about to leave after receiving the order. Wait, Jiang Shang said worriedly. Just drive them away. Try not to kill them. Yes, Lord Chunshin agreed, but in his heart he did not agree. Lord Chunshin and the others had discovered that the Shang court had arranged a large number of slaves in Mai, but only 500 regular soldiers accompanied them. To these players, this was a heaven-sent opportunity to harvest contribution points. How could they miss it? Thus, Lord Chunshin hurriedly came to seek an audience with Zhou Wang to ask for this errand. After Lord Chunshin left, Jiang Shang was still frowning, somewhat worried. Prime Minister, is there something wrong? Zhou Wang asked. Your Majesty, many of those slaves are from the Zhou people or other vassal tribes. They are targets that we can win over. I am worried that these mutants do not know their limits and will increase the number of killings. Jiang Shang explained. Didn't Lord Chunshin just promise Prime Minister that he would not kill? What is there for Prime Minister to worry about? Zhou Wang was even more confused. Jiang Shang shook his head. Your Majesty, these mutants are strange. They are self-confident and may not obey. Prime Minister worries too much. Zhou Wang was self-confident and thought that his reputation as a king was very useful. Lord Chunshin returned to his tent. Inside, Di Chun, Battle Wolf, Feng Qingyang, Xiongba, Military Kill Ripper, and Piaoling Huan were all present. How is it? Xiongba asked. He was already very familiar with Lord Chunshin. Lord Chunshin's face lit up. It's done. Good. Let's see how Sei Wui can be so arrogant this time. Military Kill Ripper hooted. Do we need to call the other lords for this mission? Battle Wolf asked. Feng Qingyang was the first to disagree. The other party only has 500 regular soldiers. Our troops add up to 4,000. It is enough to deal with them. Why should we share the contribution points with others? Battle Wolf shook his head. The mobility of the infantry is too poor. It is more appropriate to arrange for a pure cavalry unit. In that case, we can call in our core allies and form 3,000 cavalry. Feng Qingyang took a step back. Brother Di Chun, why don't you say anything? Lord Chunshin asked intentionally. Di Chun frowned and ignored Lord Chunshin's complacency. I am thinking that arranging for the slaves to dig trenches is very likely Sei Wui's stratagem. Could there be some kind of conspiracy behind this? Brother Di Chun, I think you are afraid of being tricked by Sei Wui. Feng Qingyang blabbered and looked down on Di Chun's suspicions. Lord Chunshin's face was also full of mockery. Although they had no choice but to start anew under the coercion of the various families, Lord Chunshin would not let Di Chun lead the alliance again. Naturally, he had to suppress his arrogance and not let him raise his head. Battle Wolf did not join in the uproar. What Brother Di Chun said is not impossible. We have to guard against it. Lord Chunshin shook his head. Brother Battle Wolf worries too much. According to the scouts at the front, there are no traces of other armies in the vicinity of Muyi. This time, we dispatch the cavalry to catch them off guard. When Sei Wui receives the news and rushes over to reinforce them, it will take at least a day to travel back and forth. That is enough time for us to complete our mission and retreat smoothly. Exactly. How could he say that Sei Wui is so powerful? I don't believe it. Feng Qingyang was Lord Chuanshin's staunch ally and naturally supported him. Battle Wolf was speechless. To be continued. Chapter 203. At 11 o'clock in the morning, Lord Chunshin, Wolf Warrior, Tyrant Hero, Kill Ripper, and others led 3,000 cavalrymen from Mengjinamai. That night, they arrived less than 10 kilometers away from Mai and set up camp. Unexpectedly, Di Chun did not accompany them this time. He only sent a junior general and 500 cavalrymen from Handan County to accompany the army. Di Chun's actions were naturally interpreted by Lord Chunshin and the others as cowardly and extremely disdainful. Peerless Magnificence was equally puzzled. Is there something you're worried about not accompanying us this time? Di Chun frowned, his tone deep. I have a bad premonition. After dealing with said Wui a few times, do you think he's a simple person? How could he not detect such a big flaw and wait for us to easily reap the contribution points? Lord Chunshin and the others are too confident. If that's the case, then why did you send troops? Peerless Magnificence was still puzzled. Di Chun shook his head. Recently, the clan has been mediating. During these critical times, I do not want to disrupt internal stability and unity. Taking 10,000 steps back, if I misjudged and did not send a single soldier, wouldn't I have missed a golden opportunity? Peerless Magnificence suddenly understood and was even more gratified that the shrewd Di Chun had finally returned after so many setbacks. This was more important than anything else. When Lord Chunshin and his party set up camp, they did not notice that a small bird flew over the camp and headed straight north. At 5 o'clock the next morning, the chief of military intelligence, Song San, received a report from Feng Yao. Song San did not dare delay and immediately rushed to Ouyang Shua's tent to report the military situation. The personal guard stopped Song San and said in a low voice, "His Excellency has not woken up. You cannot go in." Song San was anxious and said anxiously, "I have an urgent military situation and cannot afford to delay." Only then did the personal guard enter the tent and prepare to wake Ouyang Shua up. In fact, while they were arguing at the entrance, Ouyang Shua had already woken up. Ever since he started practicing the inner canon of a Yellow Emperor, his six senses had become more sensitive and he could detect even the slightest movement around him. Song San entered the tent and saluted. "His Excellency, Feng Yao has sent news that the enemy has indeed appeared. They number about 3,000, all of them cavalry. They are less than 10 kilometers away from Mai and will arrive this morning." Ouyang Shua was startled. The fish had finally taken a bait. If he wanted to turn defeat into victory, he had to take the Zhou dynasty's mutant army seriously. The other party had a total of 60,000 troops, and their strength was comparable to the main force of the Zhou army. Ouyang Shua had been pondering over this battle for a month or two. His mind was filled with ideas on how to turn defeat into victory. The current situation was the worst-case scenario. Di Chun and the others had actually colluded together and chosen to join the Zhou dynasty's camp. Therefore, the first step in Ouyang Shua's plan was to eliminate Lord Chunshin and the others. It was a waste of how many professional advisors Wolf Warriors and the others had. In a situation where the information was not symmetrical, they were also blind. "Guards!" Ouyang Shua shouted outside the tent. "Here!" The guard entered the tent. "Go get General Zhang Liao, General Qin Xiong, and General Lin Yi. There's important news." "Here!" After the three generals arrived, Ouyang Shua didn't waste any words and directly said, "Gather all the cavalry units and follow me to Mai." "Here!" After 2 days of training, the 10,000 cavalrymen were all assembled in less than half an hour. Such a huge movement naturally alarmed the other feudal lords. While gathering the troops, Ouyang Shua had already found Bai Hua and Feng Qiuhuang and informed them of the situation. He told them to stay behind and explain the movements of the troops. Since these feudal lords were willing to accept the reorganization of the alliance of mountains and seas, Ouyang Shua naturally didn't need to explain every movement to them. If that was the case, how could they fight? The 10,000 soldiers set off from the western suburbs of Chaoga City and headed straight for Mai. At 8 o'clock in the morning, the 600,000 slaves were driven by the Imperial Guard Army to start a day of labor. Trenches had already taken shape on the outskirts of my city. It was a spectacular sight. An hour later, the nightmare of the slaves arrived. The Zhou dynasty's army of 3,000 mutants suddenly charged towards the rising sun. Unfortunately, they didn't bring light, but darkness and blood. They were like a group of butchers, or rather, a group of devils. Without any words, they charged into the crowd of slaves and waved their butcher knives, mercilessly killing them. How could the defenseless slaves be a match for the cavalry? They were like a flock of pitiful sheep. Although there were many of them, they were chased away by a small number of wolves. This was because there were too many slaves, and the cavalry couldn't kill them all. At this time, if they wanted to live, they just had to run a little faster than their companions. The slaves were all shackled. In order to live, they didn't hesitate to push their companions to the ground just because they were blocking their way. Seeing the continuous increase in contribution points, Army Kill Ripper and the others were wild with joy. In less than 10 minutes, they had occupied the entire My Battle contribution ranking. Originally, they saw that the army came from the south. Some of the slaves thought that it was an army sent by their country to save them. Who would have thought that it would end up like this? Not only did the army not have the slightest intention of saving them, but they also waved their butcher knives at them indiscriminately. Did you see that? These devils are still laughing arrogantly. The slaves that were fleeing in a sorry state were filled with endless hatred for their country. This hatred was so intense that it surpassed their hatred for the Shang dynasty. Damn it, even the Shang dynasty didn't treat them like this. Fortunately, the 500 Imperial Guard army reacted in time and came as reinforcements. It was a pity that the Imperial Guard army was just infantry. Also, the bronze armor and shields that they were so proud of had no advantage in front of the fine metal weapons of the cavalry. Seeing the Imperial Guard army stand up for them, the slaves' hatred for their country deepened. Their king hadn't just abandoned them. He was going to kill them. But the enemy was protecting them. It was so ironic. The slaves shed tears of despair. As the temporary commander, Battle Wolf decisively ordered the troops to give up on killing the slaves and first deal with the Imperial Guard army. The ferocious cavalry immediately broke through the defensive line of the Imperial Guard army. What followed was a feast of slaughter. In less than an hour, the cavalry paid less than 200 casualties to completely destroy the 500 Imperial Guard army. Just as the smug enemy was preparing to continue harvesting the fruits of victory, their nightmare arrived. The 10,000 cavalry of Shang dynasty finally came as reinforcements under the leadership of 3 generals. Seeing the opposing army, Lord Chunshin's face paled and he murmured, "I regret listening to Di Chun." There was no need to doubt that this was a conspiracy. Battle Wolf decisively ordered the troops to immediately retreat. It was a pity that Ouyang Shuo would not give them the chance. In reality, Ouyang Shuo had already arrived with his troops 20 minutes ago. In order to completely destroy this enemy force, Ouyang Shuo had specially ordered his troops to make a large detour to the south and then counterattack north. Due to this, Battle Wolf Division's retreat route had been blocked. If they wanted to escape back to Mengjin alive, they had to break through the 10,000 cavalry. At the front of the formation, Lord Chunshin stepped forward and made a final struggle. He shouted loudly, "Is the enemy Brother Wui? Brother Wui, can you let us live? When we return, we will definitely repay you generously." Ouyang Shuo laughed and shook his head. He shouted, "Lord Chunshin, I'm very sorry. We are now enemies and serve different masters. If you want to reminisce after the battle ends, Lord Chunshin is welcome to visit Shanghai County at any time." Battle Wolf was also decisive. He turned to look at Lord Chunshin. Meeting on a narrow path, the courageous win. The only thing we can do now is to let our subordinates risk their lives to protect us as we escape. As long as we do not die, we still have a chance. Battle Wolf's meaning was very simple. According to the rules of the battle, if the Lord died, then the troops he led would be directly sent back to Gaia's territory, completely withdrawing from the battle. Therefore, as long as the Lord did not die, the loss of some cavalry would not affect the battle too much. After all, they still had a large force in Mengjin. Lord Chunxin nodded in agreement. And on the other side of the battlefield, Ouyang Shuo specially instructed Zhang Liao and the other two to not let the other lords escape. He pointed out their appearances one by one. In terms of familiarity with the rules of the battle, who could compare to Ouyang Shuo? He naturally would not make such a low-level mistake. Ouyang Shuo had formed a personal guard to protect his own safety. Battle Wolf split the cavalry into 3 groups and fled in 3 different directions. Ouyang Shuo's forces were 3 times the enemy's. In addition, the enemy had just experienced a battle and was suddenly ambushed. Their morale was low, so it was easy to tell who was superior. The 2 groups of cavalry charged at the same time and quickly collided with each other. Like 2 torrents, they collided and blood splattered into the sky. Ouyang Shuo led his personal guard and stared at military kill Ripper. This fellow had spoken rudely to him several times. Ouyang Shuo wanted to kill him personally. Military kill Ripper was also a ruthless person. He had seen blood in real life, so he was naturally not afraid. Unfortunately, this was a game. Ouyang Shuo not only crushed military kill Ripper in terms of equipment and mounts, but also in terms of individual battle power. He brandished his iron spear and displayed the Yang family spear techniques to the fullest. The Yang family spear was born for the battlefield. Ouyang Shuo's white, snake-spitting tongue went straight for military kill Ripper's vital point. Military kill Ripper was also powerful. He used a halberd and managed to block Ouyang Shuo's iron spear by a hair's breadth. Both sides fought for more than 20 rounds. Military kill Ripper's weakness gradually became apparent. At this time, Ouyang Shuo did not slack off in the slightest. He displayed the Yang family's spear techniques to the extreme, suppressing military kill Ripper until he could not breathe. Finally, he found a flaw in military kill Ripper and used his ultimate move, throat-locking spear. The iron spear in his hand danced like a swimming dragon. It quickly and violently pierced into military kill Ripper's throat, killing him in one strike. Military kill Ripper's eyes were wide open. He died with remaining grievance. He fell from his horse and turned into a ray of white light. To be continued. Chapter 204. P.S. 200 monthly tickets. Thanks for the support. After killing military kill, Ouyang Shuo looked around to check the situation on the battlefield. Both sides fell into a stalemate. There was me and you and me. At this time, Ouyang Shuo noticed that a small group of troops was about to break through the encirclement and escape towards the south. He didn't need to think to know that it was the wolf warriors. Ouyang Shuo didn't hesitate at all. He turned his horse around and chased after them. On the way, he met up with Lin Yi's vanguard battalion and chased after the enemy. At this time, the advantage of the cyan beetle horses was displayed. Ouyang Shuo and his troops caught up to the enemy less than 5 kilometers away from the battlefield. After a rough count, the other party had less than a platoon. Clearly, they were the elites of the elites. The war horses were also very fast. It was a pity that they met the cyan beetle horses. Otherwise, they might have escaped successfully. Ouyang Shuo realized that this platoon should be Xiongba's men. He still remembered that Xiongba used 1,200 gold to buy a heavy cavalry talisman in the last auction. It should be this platoon in front of him. Xiongba, bro, how have you been? Ouyang Shuo shouted. In the platoon, there was one person who clearly paused. He probably didn't think that they would be caught so quickly. This person, naturally, was Xiongba. However, Xiongba didn't give up and ordered his troops to retreat. Ouyang Shuo smiled coldly and made a hand signal to Lin Yi. Lin Yi understood and immediately split the vanguard battalion into 2 groups. They would circle around from the side and surround the enemy. Being surrounded like a dumpling, Xiongba could only order his troops to stop. He turned his horse around to face Ouyang Shuo and said with a bitter smile, "Brother Wui, do you really want to kill us all?" Beside Xiongba stood his best friend, Wandering Linghuan. Ouyang Shuo naturally had a heart of stone. He smiled. "Xiongba, bro, we can only blame ourselves for choosing the opposite side. I hope you can think carefully about which side you choose next time. Don't choose the wrong side again. Xiongba's eyes focused. He felt that there was a hidden meaning in Wui's words. Could it be that he already knew about their conspiracy? Did he really have that much power? Xiongba was bewildered in his heart, but he didn't show it on the surface and said with a smile, "Brother Wui, it's useless even if you kill me." Dichen was still in Mengjin. With him around, the mutant army of the Zhou dynasty would not crumble. Why don't you do me a favor and help me out? It's not easy to level up. This old fox was playing the favor card again. Ouyang Shua suddenly understood. No wonder he didn't see Dichen. As the saying goes, the person who understands you the most is often your enemy. Dichen had suffered a few defeats in his hands, and he had almost grasped Ouyang Shua's pulse. How interesting. You don't have to worry about me. I have my own ways to deal with Dichen. Ouyang Shua remained unmoved. How about it? Let me send you off. Then he waved his hand. The personal guards and vanguard battalion received the order and charged forward without hesitation. Xiongba was startled. He was truly surprised. This person was an ambitious and ruthless person, able to rise and fall at the same time. He laughed and said, "Good, Brother Wui, it seems like we are kindred spirits. Today, I accept my defeat wholeheartedly." After finishing off the Xiongba division, Ouyang Shua led his troops back to the battlefield. At this time, the battle was already over. On the plains, the horses that had lost their masters neighed helplessly. The wounded who had not died yet lay on the ground, wailing in pain. The blood that flowed from their bodies stained the ground beneath them. Broken spears were stuck in the ground alone, telling of the endless desolation. When Zhang Liao and Qin Xiong saw Ouyang Shua, they rushed over. "Lord, the enemy has been completely annihilated." Ouyang Shua nodded. "Did any of the lords slip through the net? Other than those who were caught by Lord, the rest were all killed." Zhang Liao did not disappoint him. "What about the slaves?" Ouyang Shua continued to ask. "I've already sent troops to capture them. Those who escaped have all been captured." Ouyang Shua had already instructed Zhang Liao not to kill the slaves indiscriminately. Zhang Liao carried out his orders very thoroughly. "Bring me to them." Ouyang Shua still had some thoughts about the slaves. Yes, although it had only been less than half an hour, tens of thousands of slaves had died. On the outskirts of Mai, the newly dug trenches were soaked in blood. Ouyang Shua rode to the front of the slaves and said loudly, "Now, I, the representative of the mutants, am speaking to you. You have all seen that the Shang dynasty has sent troops to protect you. Your country and your tribes have completely abandoned you. You are already standing on the edge of a cliff with no way out. Lord, please save us." Someone began to cry for help. "Save us." Even more slaves echoed. Ouyang Shua raised his hand and signaled for silence. He continued, "If you want to live, it is actually very simple. Continue to work and dig the trenches. If necessary, pick up your weapons and go to the battlefield to serve the Shang dynasty." Because the 500 imperial guards arranged by King Xian had been completely annihilated, Ouyang Shua decided to leave the cavalry in my city to protect the slaves and ensure that the fortifications could be completed on time. Ouyang Shua brought his personal guards back to Chaoga City to report the details to King Xian. The news of the mutant army being completely annihilated in Mengjin had already spread throughout the headquarters. Zhou Wuong was naturally unhappy. The people who were even more unhappy were the feudal lords. It was only now that they found out that Lord Chunxin and the others had secretly gone to harvest contribution points behind their backs. Although they were ambushed and forced to withdraw from the battle, their contribution points on the battle contribution board were all more than 10,000. This was very eye-catching. As the representative of the mutants, Lord Chunxin's behavior was too unsightly. Thus, their deaths did not receive any sympathy. There was only schadenfreude and disdain. Dichen, the only one who escaped death, stood up at this time and tried to replace Lord Chunxin and reorganize the feudal lord's troops. Unfortunately, the feudal lords did not listen to him. The feudal lords thought, "Dichen, you did not go, but your troops did. You will also have a share in the contribution points. Right now, there are only 500 infantrymen left in Handan County. Who gives you the right to command us? Di Chun was also helpless. He could only do his best and leave it to fate. Fortunately, there were some feudal lords who understood the big picture. They knew that at this time, they had to be even more united. Otherwise, it was very likely that the Shang dynasty's players would turn the tables. This group of players naturally would not accept Di Chen's leadership. Instead, they formed their own alliance. In the royal tent, Zhou Wuwang was flustered and exasperated. Prime Minister, what should we do now? Should we send another army to destroy the enemy's trenches? Jiang Shangdao was still as calm as usual. Your Majesty, there is no need to be so anxious. This is just a small defeat. We only lost a small portion of the mutant army. It will not affect the overall situation. After Zhou Wang calmed down, he continued, as for sending another army to harass them, I'm afraid that will not work. The enemy must have been prepared. The only thing we could do now is to wait for all the feudal lords to arrive. Then, we will immediately send troops to Mai and fight to the death. Jiang Shang's plan was to defeat the Shang dynasty's army head-on with a dignified army. This was because, according to the intelligence from Weizi, there were less than 20,000 regular soldiers in Chaoga City. The difference in strength was too great. If Jiang Shang knew that there were 100,000 crossbowmen in Chaoga City undergoing emergency training, who knew what he would think? After calming down, GFA said, Prime Minister, should we send someone to contact Weizi and find out what has happened in Chaoga City? Who exactly is helping them? Jiang Shang naturally had no objections. Compared to the scattered Zhou dynasty's camp, the Shang dynasty's camp was much more united. Ouyang Shua had used his actions to prove that he had the ability to lead everyone to victory. Lord Chunshin's act of monopolizing everything showed Ouyang Shua's selflessness. The 2,000 stubborn nobles finally compromised and agreed to be reorganized by the Alliance of Mountains and Seas. At this point, the Alliance of Mountains and Seas had complete control over the Shang dynasty's camp. Ouyang Shua used this opportunity to increase his influence among the feudal lords and establish a good reputation. This was very important. As long as Ouyang Shua could persevere, then in the future battles, he wouldn't need to waste his breath to convince the feudal lords one by one. They would automatically unite around the Alliance of Mountains and Seas and accept their reorganization. After listening to Ouyang Shua's report, King Xin felt sorry for the Imperial Guard army that had died in battle. At the same time, he was happy that Ouyang Shua had won a beautiful battle. He trusted Ouyang Shua even more. Not only that, this victory was like sending charcoal in a snowstorm. When the news of the victory spread to Chaoga City, it quickly calmed the people's fear and unease. Only then did the people in the city know that there was a powerful mutant army helping them to resist the Zhou dynasty's invasion. The tense situation in Chaoga City was alleviated. The first to benefit was the logistics. The common people were generous and took the initiative to donate the food in their homes to serve as the army's rations. Under the command of the court officials, they transported batches of food from Chaoga City to my city. After the food was sufficient, King Xin, under Ouyang Shua's suggestion, improved the food of the slaves outside my city to ensure that they could barely eat their fill. This undoubtedly confirmed Ouyang Shua's previous promise to them. The slaves worked even harder. At the same time, 100,000 crossbows were assembled and distributed to the slaves. General Eli was in the military camp, stepping up the training of the slaves to ensure that they had a sense of propriety and would not fall into chaos. Eli divided the 100,000 crossbowmen into 10,000-man phalanxes. Each 10,000-man phalanx was then divided into 10,000-man phalanx. Under Ouyang Shua's suggestion, Muging led 5,000 crossbowmen into the phalanx. Each 1,000-man phalanx had 50 crossbowmen assigned to be the instructors and commanders of the phalanx. By mixing the mutant army with the camp army, Ouyang Shua could be considered a first. If not for King Xion's trust and support, it would have been impossible. To be continued. Chapter 205. On the 10th day of the Battle of Mai, in the Shang capital, Chaoga. Chaoga City was a city that welcomed the rising sun and flourished with each passing day. Bathed in the warm sunlight of the rising sun, the Shang army set off from the southern gate, marching majestically towards Mai. The army consisted of more than 40,000 mutants, 100,000 slave crossbowmen, 10,000 imperial guards, 6,000 royal guards, and 12 war elephants. The total number of soldiers was more than 150,000. The appearance of the Shang war elephants for the first time shocked Ouyang Shuo and the other lords. The war elephants wore armor made of rhinoceros hide and hardwood. They had bronze masks on their faces, and sharp spears were tied to their tusks. On the war elephant's back was a wooden battle tower shaped like a chariot. There was a driver, 2 archers, and 2 halberd wielders on it. Such a huge beast armed to the teeth was like a human bulldozer on the battlefield. No one could stop it. Wherever the war elephant passed, it would leave a trail of blood. The only pity was that there were too few war elephants. Most of the elephant formations were still fighting against Dongyi in the east. Otherwise, the chariots of the Zhou army would not be a problem. If the Imperial Guard were the elites of the Shang dynasty, then the Royal Guards were the elites of the elites. They had followed the Shang king, King Xian, and fought hundreds of battles in the south. The Royal Guards were all descendants of nobles. They were the true soldiers of the Shang dynasty and were loyal to the Shang king. The soldiers of the Imperial Guard army and the Royal Guards were filled with righteous indignation at the rebellion of Zhou and the vassal states. They were determined to use the spears in their hands to defend the glory of the Shang dynasty. Their morale was high and their fighting spirit was boiling. The people of Chaoga lined up at the city gate to send off the soldiers. Both the Imperial Guards and the Royal Guards were the true soldiers of Chaoga. They were the true members of the Shang clan and could not be compared to the slave army. The Shang king, King Xian, personally led the army on a chariot inlaid with gold and silver gems. The mighty army had banners fluttering in the wind, spears and spears standing in great numbers, and the military was solemn. Row after row of the army passed through the southern gate and walked on the official road to my city, stirring up waves of dust. The people on both sides of the road spontaneously danced to pray to the gods to send off the army. They prayed to the ghosts and gods to protect the soldiers who went to war so that they could all return safely. That was because their parents, wives, and children were waiting for their sons, husbands, and fathers to return home and reunite with them. Xian sat on the golden chariot and waved at the people, attracting cheers. Although their king was cruel, stubborn, and temperamental, their king had made great contributions to the war and did not abandon his people. Instead, he personally led the army into battle. This was enough to win the support of the people. When rows of slaves armed with crossbows appeared, the commoners cried out in alarm. As the last slavery dynasty in China's history, the status of slaves in society was very low. They were captives, commodities, goods, and livestock. The only thing they weren't treated as people. One could imagine what kind of impact it would have on ordinary people, merchants, nobles, and slave owners when such a group of non-humans were equipped with crossbows and trained into an army. If not for the fact that the Shang dynasty was at a critical moment, there would definitely be a large group of people standing up to oppose the Shang king's actions. That was because it had already violated the vital interests of the nobles and slave owners. The slaves who were selected from the 700,000 slaves were relatively strong and obedient. They walked cautiously in the formation, frightened and uneasy. They felt very uncomfortable under the gazes of the people around them. It was as if they were walking naked on the street. They were far from adapting to their new identities. General Lai, who was a slave, walked at the front of the crossbow army. This ferocious-looking general with outstanding martial arts skills and incomparable strength was also warmly welcomed by the people. Walking at the back was the mutant army. Although the cavalry had suffered some losses in the previous battle, it was still the most powerful army and walked at the front of the army. Following closely behind the cavalry troops were the 20,000 saber and shield troops. One by one, they marched to the same rhythm and passed through the South City Gate. The magnificent appearance of the army and the exquisite armor were all moving. The army walked on the official road, and they couldn't see the end of it. The front army had already reached Mai, but the rear army had yet to pass through the southern gate of Chaoga City. The official road was filled with rows of soldiers, and there was no room for pedestrians. It was not until 3 in the afternoon that the last row of saber and shield soldiers reached Mai. Mai was just a small city. The city walls were dilapidated and low. They were simply made of yellow soil and did not have any defensive capabilities. However, as the last gate to the capital of Chaoga City, Mai was so important. The army did not enter the city and directly set up camp in the southern suburbs. Rows of tents occupied the plains, high slopes, and valleys in the southern suburbs. They were densely packed and almost surrounded the entire Mai city. At this time, the southern suburbs were already beyond recognition. Trenches that were 1 meter wide and 2 meters deep covered the entire front of the southern suburbs. The distance between each trench was less than 100 meters, and the overall length was more than 1,000 meters. It almost prevented the chariots from charging. Such a trench would not affect the cavalry's attack. The Shang King, King Exan, stationed in Mai city and used it as the temporary command center for the army. The citizens of Mai city, including the 600,000 slaves, had all been moved to Chaoga City to avoid wasting the rations stored in the city. At the same time, it was also to guard against the spies of the Zhou dynasty. The entire Mai city had become a military fortress. Other than the soldiers, there were only logistics personnel in charge of the rations. The royal guards took over the security of the government office to ensure the safety of the Shang King Xian. That night, King Xian gathered all the generals in the government office to discuss the formation for the next day. As the representative of the mutants, Ouyang Shuo was fortunate enough to attend the military meeting. In fact, Ouyang Shuo had already become the favorite of the Shang King Xian. His status had far exceeded the authority of the mutants. Many of his suggestions were accepted by the King Xian. Of course, many of Ouyang Shuo's plans were backed by Zhu Sheng. Meng Jin, Yong, Liu, Peng, Pu, Shu, Chong, Wei, and Ho finally arrived with their troops. After gathering all the feudal vassals, King Wu of Zhou and the feudal vassals held an anti-Shang vow in Mengjin. During the vow, King Wu of Zhou issued a declaration against the Shang King. He listed 6 crimes of the Shang King. The first was drunkenness. The second was not using the nobles. The third was using petty people. The fourth was listening to women. The fifth was believing in the heavens. The sixth was not paying attention to the sacrifices. A small country in the west, under the rule of the Shang dynasty, had publicly accused its king of crimes. Even his drunkenness was included in the list. This showed how hypocritical the Zhou dynasty was. They were clearly rebelling against their superiors. Yet, they wanted to portray themselves as the embodiment of justice. After that, a grand ceremony was held. King Wu of Zhou and the other tribal leaders swore an oath to destroy the Shang dynasty. The sacrificial ceremony was also conducted using living people. However, the sacrificial offerings were replaced with Shang dynasty captives. After the sacrificial ceremony, the soldiers headed straight for Mai. Western Zhou's army consisted of 300 chariots, 3,000 royal guards, and 45,000 armored soldiers. This was a real army. The soldiers were well-trained and experienced. They were well-trained and well-equipped. In addition to the feudal vassals, the total number of soldiers was 70,000. In addition, there were over 50,000 mutants. Even so, the weapons and equipment of the Zhou army were far inferior to the Shang army. The Shang dynasty's bronze, smelting, and manufacturing standards were extremely high. The bronze weapons and armors they produced were of high quality and far superior to the Zhou army. This was especially true for the infantry armors. The Shang army had already popularized armor made of bronze and rhinoceros skin. In particular, the bronze helmet was the standard equipment of the Shang army at that time. Its structural design, manufacturing process, product quality, and defensive power were second to none in the world of the same period. However, The Zhou army only had ordinary leather or wooden armors. Even the nobles and guards of the Zhou army did not have bronze armors. The two were incomparable in terms of defensive capabilities. Of course, compared to the slave army that had no armor and only a bronze dagger axe, the Zhou army was much stronger than the slave army in history. Zhou and the Shang were archenemies. Among them, there was the feud that the Shang royal family had with King Wu of Zhou for 3 generations. There was also the battle for territory, population, and sovereignty between the two countries because the Shang had repeatedly sent troops to attack the Zhou dynasty. Therefore, be it the royal family of the two countries or the commoners, both sides had always been vile. By the time of King Wu of Zhou, the entire Western Zhou had accumulated a blood feud against the Shang for at least 100 years. This time, Western Zhou had staked everything on this one gamble. They had mobilized all the available military forces in the country. Therefore, the people of Zhou had no way out. If they were defeated, the consequences would be unimaginable. The morale of the army, from the King Wu to the soldiers, was extremely high and unified. The vassals also send out the most elite and powerful regular army of their country. Since the founding of the Shang dynasty, they had constantly conquered neighboring countries, tribes, and ethnic groups. Their main purpose was to expand their territory and plunder people. Other than increasing the number of slaves and expanding production, the other important purpose of plundering people was to obtain living sacrifices for divination and worship, or for the nobles to be buried with them. Shang's theocratic rule was extremely strict and often required living sacrifices. These materials were also particular about quality. Most of them had to be young and strong. This meant that they needed a large number of living people. Therefore, the Shang dynasty frequently and severely robbed people. Moreover, the entire Shang clan worshipped and believed in violence and military force. Against the surrounding tribes and countries, especially in the West, most of them resorted to direct and simple violence. This eventually led to these ethnic groups being filled with unforgettable hatred towards the Shang. Once the time was ripe, they would do anything to take revenge. The morale of the Shang army were the same as that of Western Zhou. The royal family of the Western Zhou dynasty had always been gentle and virtuous. As a result, the 3 generations of the royal family of the Western Zhou dynasty had great influence both within the country and among the surrounding tribes, royal families, and people. Therefore, they were able to rally the support of many. The mighty army flowed along the Wei River and headed straight for Mai. The flags of the various vassal states fluttered in the wind, showing their determination to rebel against the Shang. This was a group of enemies with a blood feud. A flock of birds flew across the gloomy sky, leaving behind endless loneliness. To be continued. Chapter 206. The next morning, the main forces of both sides set up in the southern outskirts of Mai. The gloomy sky suddenly began to drizzle. Dark clouds covered the sky above the battlefield and did not disperse for a long time. On the Zhou army's side, because of the trenches, the chariots were forced to be at the back as reserves. The middle army was made up of the Zhou army. The 3,000 stalwart Tiger army was at the front, followed by 45,000 armored soldiers. The vassal army was on the left, while the mutant army was on the right. The Zhou dynasty's camp formed a standard attack formation. Before the battle, the Zhou army held a solemn oath after setting up the formation. King Wu of Zhou scolded King Zhou for listening to his concubine's slander, killing nobles and officials, not worshipping his ancestors, and brutally killing the people. On the Shang side, the 100,000 crossbowmen were the core of the army, so they decided to be on the defensive. The 20,000 sword and shield soldiers of the mutant army were at the front. They used the shields in their hands to form a steel line of defense. The 100,000 crossbowmen were behind the sword and shield soldiers in a fan formation. The crossbowmen formed a fan-shaped attack net, shooting from the left and right sides. Under such a 3-dimensional defense system, the front, left, and right sides, as well as the combination of direct and projectile attacks, greatly increased the killing power of the crossbows. Each 1,000 crossbowmen team was divided into 3 groups. The first group aimed and fired, called firing crossbows. The second group was in a waiting position, called advancing crossbows. The third group pulled the strings, called loading crossbows. When the first group finished shooting, they would retreat to the third group. This cycle continued to maintain the continuity of shooting. The left wing was the Imperial Guard Army, Royal Guards, and War Elephants. The right wing was the 10,000 mutant cavalry. In order to leave enough distance for the charge, the cavalry was placed slightly behind. The formation of the Shang army was out of Jiang Shang's expectations. A few days ago, the spies sent to contact Wei Zi had not returned. Jiang Shang already had a bad feeling. Now, seeing that the opposite camp was not the chaotic slave army that he had expected, but the elite army that had appeared, he couldn't help but feel that something was wrong. But the demand for Shang had already been issued. It was too late to retreat now. The arrow was knocked on the bow and had to be released. Jiang Shang personally walked to the war drums and beat them. The war drums sounded. The Zhou army and the alliance army of the various vassals stepped on the drums. One after another, they took firm steps and crossed the trenches one after another. They were like an overwhelming torrent that pressed towards the Shang army. The rolling army trampled the green ground of the southern suburbs of Mai, just like the tide drowning the beach, surging towards the camp of the Shang army, wanting to swallow it in one bite. King Wuang of Zhou took the lead and walked in front of the battle formation, surrounded by the brave Tiger army. Under the control of Zhou Wuang, the battle formation advanced in unison. They lined up neatly and marched in unison. Above the battle formation, spears and spears lit up like a forest, and the military flags of various vassal states fluttered in the wind. "Raise your shields." The herald gave an order and waved the flag. The stalwart Tiger army in the front row raised their wooden shields like an iron wall. The soldiers shouted rhythmically and hit their shields with their weapons. Woo 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 woo. Accompanied by the shouts and the rhythmic drum beats, the phalanxes advanced in unison. When the black mass of the Zhou army was 300 meters away from the Shang army, the Shang army's counterattack began. Under the command of the instructors, the army of 100,000 crossbowmen overcame their fear and half knelt on the ground. They raised their crossbows and started shooting. The massacre that happened in the suburbs of Mai had already reached the ears of the slave crossbowmen. The Zhou army did not care about their lives at all. Since that was the case, what was there to hesitate about? Countless arrows interwove in the air to form an impenetrable net of arrows, covering the heads of the Zhou army. Every wave of arrows took away the lives of thousands upon thousands of soldiers, splashing up waves of blood. The archers of the Zhou army were suppressed to the point where they could not fight back. They could only take the attacks passively. The advancing troops fell row by row. Be it the elite stalwart Tiger army, the vassal alliance army, or even the mutant army, they all groaned under the rain of arrows. No one could block the sharpness of the arrows. King Wuang of Zhou tried his best to stabilize the battle formation and not cause chaos. The rear army stepped on the corpses of the front army and crushed them into meat paste. Under King Wuang's encouragement, they continued to advance fearlessly. Retreating was a dead end. When they met on a narrow path, the brave would win. As long as they crossed the 300-meter death line, the crossbowman army would only have the fate of being slaughtered by them. The Zhou army firmly believed. The soldiers were hit by arrows one after another. The injured soldiers lay on the ground and filled the trenches. Blood flowed along the trenches and gathered into trickles, dyeing the ground completely red. The soldiers dripped blood, stepped on corpses, and braved the rain of arrows as they continued forward. This was a vengeful army that had no way out. After defeating their fear, the crossbowmen became more confident and their cooperation became smoother. The arrows increased in number and density, and their penetrative power increased. They brushed past the ears and shoulders of the soldiers, or, with a puff, they shot into an unlucky person. The simple leather or wooden armor of the Zhou army could not block the sharp arrows at all. The casualties were too high. A short distance of 300 meters caused the Zhou army to pay the price of 20,000 to 30,000 people. When the remaining armored soldiers finally rushed to the front of the Shang army, what welcomed them was the steel defense line led by Shi Wansui. 1,000 heavy infantry from Shanghai County were arranged at the front. The infantry armor, forged with fine iron, was unbreakable and indestructible. The spears of the Zhou army could not break through its defense at all. As an imperial general, Shi Wansui had three specialties. Leading the way, increased the morale of the troops by 40, fighting south and north, increased the movement speed of the troops by 30, and insight, increased the attack power of the troops by 20. In addition, the Shang dynasty's defense power increased by 25. Under the support of Shi Wansui, this troop of saber and shield soldiers was an invincible army of tigers and wolves in front of the Zhou soldiers who used bronze weapons and wore leather armor. Shi Wansui raised the spear in his hand and shouted, "Kill! Kill! Kill! Kill!" The saber and shield soldier raised his shield with his left hand and blocked the enemy's spear. He waved his sharp saber with his right hand and cut the enemy into two. Severed limbs danced in the air, causing blood to spurt out. The elite troops that the Zhou army was proud of were like chickens and dogs in front of them. The steel defense line formed by the saber and shield soldiers prevented the Zhou army from advancing. Instead, they were suppressed and forced to retreat. The crossbowmen at the back were like tireless killing machines. They were still working, wave after wave of arrows, mercilessly taking thousands of lives. The range of the arrow rain was so large that not only the Zhou soldiers in the center of the net, but also the dukes and mutant armies on the left and right flanks were also within the range of the arrow rain. A third of the 50,000 mutants in the Zhou army had been cut down by the arrow rain. The lords at the front had suffered heavy losses. Some had become generals without an army, while others had been cleared out of the battle map. At this time, many of the lords had thoughts of retreating and were afraid to advance. What followed was an even greater nightmare. Under the cover of the crossbowmen, the elephant formation attacked. The soldiers on the towers on the backs of the war elephants used crossbows to shoot from afar and long bronze dagger axes to kill their opponents. At the same time, they controlled the war elephants to use their trunks and tusks to attack the enemy. Around the war elephants, 10,000 Imperial Guard army followed closely to protect the war elephants from the enemy infantry. The war elephants caused great waves in the mutant army. The mutant army was like a plate of loose sand. They had a large number of riders, but they were not organized effectively. Instead, they were fighting for themselves. They had already suffered heavy losses before they even reached the front of the formation. Now that they were attacked by the war elephants, they were immediately thrown into chaos. The soldiers could not find their commanders, and the commanders could not find their lords. They did not know if they should continue to advance or retreat. They had great fighting power but could not use it. The Imperial Guard army of the Shang dynasty had the determination to protect their homeland. Under the cover of the war elephants, they swung their spears at the enemy and reaped their lives. The bronze armor and helmets provided good protection for the Imperial Guard army. The mutant army that had originally had the advantage was fighting very ugly. At this time, the inferior Shang Imperial Guard army and Royal Guards had the advantage. It was a great irony. On the right flank, Zhang Liao raised his long spear and gave the order to attack. Charge! The cavalry raised their long weapons, spears, and long spears, and charged towards the dukes that had lost half of their forces. Under the control of the cavalry, the war horses nimbly crossed the trenches without slowing down and charged towards the other side. In an era where chariots were prevalent, a cavalry unit like this was the enemy's nightmare. The arrows hit the radiant armor of the Shanghai County Heavy Cavalry at the very front, but it was like tickling and did not cause any damage. The cavalrymen were like a red-hot soldering iron stabbing into butter, easily tearing the Allied army in half. There was not a single soldier that could stand on the path of the cavalry. There was not even a proper corpse because they had been trampled into meat paste by the cavalry behind them. This was not a war, but a living massacre. The battlefield had instantly become a slaughterhouse. The ferocious cavalry charged back and forth unscrupulously in the midst of the Allied forces, completely crippling the troops. Even the bravest soldier could not help but tremble in fear when faced with such a hell on earth. The cavalry's spears pierced through the enemy under the great inertia of the impact. They pierced several people at once, like human meat skewers. The soldiers that had not yet died let out tragic cries in midair. The cavalry did not move. With a shake and a fling, the skewered corpses were easily thrown to the ground. Their intestines and organs all fell out and flowed everywhere. Then the horses trampled over them and mixed them with the mud and grass to make a human meat salad. The merciless rain of arrows continued to harvest the soldiers of the Zhou dynasty. To be continued. Chapter 207. The course of the battle at Mai was beyond everyone's expectations. The Zhou army had suffered a setback on 3 fronts. More than half of their forces had died, and they were on the brink of total collapse. Jiang Shang, who was in charge of the rear of the battlefield, could not help but sigh. He bitterly gave the order to retreat. Jiang Shang knew that today's battle had completely cut off any possibility of Western Zhou overthrowing the Shang dynasty. After this battle, it was hard to say if Western Zhou would be able to survive the Shang dynasty's counterattack. He did not forget that in the far east, the main force of the Shang army was rushing back to Chaoga at full speed to rescue the king. The dagger was revealed when the plan was revealed, but it ended up like this. As the prime minister of Zhou and the commander-in-chief of the army, Jiang Shang could not absolve himself from the blame. Before he died, he had one more thing to do. That was to protect King Wu of Zhou's life and preserve the bloodline of the Western Zhou royal family. As long as the bloodline was not broken, there would be a day when they could rise again. Jiang Shang ordered the chariots to turn around and prepare to retreat. Once King Wu retreated, they would retreat immediately. As for the surviving soldiers and the vassal army, Jiang Shang could not be bothered with them. At the end of the day, Jiang Shang was a utilitarian through and through. He had already reached the point of perfection in the art of trickery and trickery. The Dongyi tribes had rebelled because of Jiang Shang's connections. Jiang Shang had instigated the Dongyi tribes to fight against the Shang dynasty while Western Zhou reaped the benefits. After receiving the order to retreat, King Wu displayed his role as an emperor at the critical moment. He left his soldiers behind and allowed the vassal army to retreat first. In reality, the vassal army had been defeated by the cavalry. They had abandoned their armor and were left with less than 1,000 soldiers. This battle was a nightmare for the vassal states. After returning to their countries, the vassal states had to deal with the Shang dynasty's attack. Given King Xian's vengeful character, the best outcome for the vassal states was to be sacrificed to the gods. As for the Zhou dynasty's mutant army, they had already retreated. Seeing that they could not win, the lords naturally would not stay behind to die with the Zhou army. Every soldier they brought was an elite of their territories, and they could not afford to lose them. The surviving 20,000-odd mutants abandoned their armor and scattered in all directions. Some dove into the forest, some crossed the river, and some ran into the mountains. They were like a pack of stray dogs, and the scene was spectacular. These feudal lords didn't intend to return to Mengjin either. They decided to hide outside until the battle was over. The king of Shang, DXN, knew the nature of the mutants and knew that they could not stay here for too long. Due to this, he did not arrange for the Imperial Guard army to continue the pursuit to avoid unnecessary losses. In this battle, while they successfully suppressed the mutant army, the Imperial Guard army and the Imperial Guard army had suffered great losses. After all, the strength of the Inhuman army was clear for all to see. In order to earn contribution points, some of the smaller teams fought with their lives on the line. In this battle, all the war elephants had died, more than half of the Imperial Guard army had died, and more than 1,000 Imperial Guard had died. Di Chun let out a long sigh as he looked at the fleeing army. In the Battle of Muyi, they completely lost to Sei Wui. Lord Chun Shin and the rest did not even have the opportunity to participate in the final battle. After the battle, no one knew what kind of storm would arise. "What should we do now?" Peerless Elegance asked. Dichen looked around. The number of troops he could mobilize now was less than 500. They really could not do anything. Moreover, their cavalry had already been wiped out. Even if they wanted to retreat with King Wuwang, they could not. The only way was to follow the other feudal lords and leave the wilderness. Dichen laughed bitterly. "What else can we do? Let's run for our lives." The surviving 500 members of the brave Tiger Army surrounded King Wuwang and quickly retreated. The surviving 20,000 soldiers advanced instead of retreating. They took over the defensive line left behind by the brave Tiger Army and fought against the sword and shield troops led by Shi Wansui. The armored soldiers were already prepared to die. Their only mission was to buy enough time for their king to retreat. The soldiers had already gone crazy. If they were stabbed, they would cling to the enemy and not let go, creating a good opportunity for their comrades to kill the enemy. It was a tragic scene. For a moment, they managed to block the attack of the sword and shield troops. Shi Wansui was naturally not an ordinary person. The sea of blood on the battlefield had completely ignited his bloodlust. He stabbed an armored soldier to death with his spear and roared, "Don't let King Wuwang escape. Kill them. Those who block me will die. Kill, kill, kill." The mountain barbarian heavy infantry let out a deafening roar. No matter how crazy a radish was, it could not withstand a kitchen knife. Once the sword and shield troops were hugged by the enemy, they would simply cut the enemy's hands in half and kick them away. Or he could wave his shield and directly use a powerful shield strike to split open his opponent's head, causing his brain juice to burst. The 20,000 armored soldiers were cut off layer by layer at a speed visible to the naked eye. The scene was extremely bloody. The sacrifice of their comrades did not make the latecomers timid. On the contrary, they became even crazier. While retreating, King Wuwang could not help but burst into tears when he heard the angry roars coming from behind him. His soldiers were being mercilessly slaughtered by the enemy, but he, the king, could do nothing. King Wuwang turned around and looked at Di Exen, who was standing on the golden chariot supervising the battle. He said fiercely, "Di Exen, if I don't kill you, I will not be the ruler of the human world." With an even more bitter hatred, he met up with the chariot troops. Even now, the crossbowmen in the rear did not stop shooting. Therefore, the enemy's retreat route was still advancing in the rain of arrows. Many soldiers were shot in the back when they retreated and fell to the ground. At this time, their comrades were already safe and could not care about them. They left the wounded lying on the ground and wailing helplessly. They turned a deaf ear to their cries for help. The trenches in the southern suburbs had been completely filled with corpses, and blood flowed everywhere. The cruel thing was that these corpses helped the soldiers retreat quickly and became the best stepping stones. At least they did not have to spend effort to cross the trenches. At this time, every minute and second was so precious. It was a matter of life and death. The soldiers' only thought was to quickly get out of the enemy's crossbowmen's shooting range. The powerful crossbowmen became a lingering nightmare for the Zhou army. Even King Wuwang could not help but sigh when he retreated. Those who perish are strong crossbows. When they met up with the chariot behind them, there were less than 1,000 people left out of the 1,500 soldiers. Ouyang Shua did not intend to give up. He had already been appointed as the commander of the battlefield by the king of Shang. He gave the order to capture King Wuwang alive and capture Jiangshang. At the same time, he ordered the cavalry to assist the sword and shield troops to quickly destroy the army that was still resisting stubbornly. Capture King Wuwang alive and capture Jiangshang. The soldiers shouted and launched a counterattack. The cavalry was still the first to move. Under the leadership of Zhang Liao, Qin Xiong, and Lin Yi, the cavalry suddenly turned left and plunged into the enemy's center. It was true that if the cavalry suddenly plunged into the enemy's rear, there was a high chance that they could destroy the 300 chariots behind the Zhou army and even capture Jiangshang. However, once the chariots were destroyed, it was equivalent to completely destroying the last hope of the Zhou army's retreat. They could only force them to fight with their lives on the line. That was a very unwise move. Other than that, Ouyang Shuo had his own selfish motives. If he let King Wuong escape now, then only the cavalry of Shanhai County could catch up to them. In this way, the reward for killing Zhou Wuong would definitely fall into his hands and not be snatched away by some lucky person. Moreover, Ouyang Shuo did not want the sword and shield troops to suffer too many losses. The damage caused by the berserk soldiers was still very great. The reinforcement of the cavalry completely forced the Zhou soldiers into a dead end. The cavalry and the sword and shield troops cooperated with each other and launched a pincer attack on the surviving soldiers. It was only then that the crossbowmen stopped shooting. The continuous high-intensity shooting made the slaves, who were not physically fit to begin with, so tired that they almost collapsed. Even the 5,000 mutant crossbowmen were exhausted. They were the main contributors to today's victory. By the time the cavalry and the sword and shield troops completely annihilated the surviving soldiers, King Wuong had already escaped in the chariots with Jiang Shang and the kings of the vassal states. The noisy battlefield suddenly quieted down, leaving only a few painful moans. The pitter-patter of rain stopped at some point. The dark clouds dispersed, and the sun shone on the earth again, bringing warmth to all the survivors. The sun shone on the southern suburbs. There was no longer a trace of green. The grass was covered with corpses and dyed red with blood. A flock of vultures flew from the sky and circled in the sky, unwilling to leave for a long time. Facing the hell in front of them, many lords could not bear it and retreated to the back, vomiting nonstop. They could only blame the game for being too realistic and too bloody. Countless organs, rectums, and brain matter flowed on the grass, attracting swarms of flies. Perhaps for the animals in the wilderness, this was an unexpected gluttonous feast. King Xian of Shang stood on the golden chariot, not caring about the corpses around him. General Yi came beside him, chuckling. Ouyang Shuo rode the cyan beetle horse to the side of the golden chariot, dismounted, and cupped his fists. Your Majesty, the enemy leader has escaped. Please allow me to lead my troops to chase after him. King Xian had the same intention. Of course, he understood the principle of eliminating the root of the problem. However, the Imperial Guards and the Royal Guard alone could not catch up to the enemy's chariots. King Xian was naturally happy that Ouyang Shuo volunteered. All right, then I'll trouble you to make another trip. When you return to Chaoga, I will reward you handsomely, King Xian promised. Yes. Ouyang Shuo got on his horse after receiving the order, found Lin Yi, and led the cavalry of Shanhai County towards Mengjin. The other lords watched the cavalry of Shanhai County leave with envious expressions. Of course, they knew how many contribution points were waiting to be harvested after they caught up. King Wuong of Zhou was not the only one who escaped. There were also the kings of the vassal states. Those were all huge contribution points. They only hated that their war horses were not strong enough. To be continued. Chapter 208. Following the chariots, Ouyang Shuo led the remaining 1,700 elite cavalrymen of Shanhai County South along the Wei River. He was determined to capture all the leaders of the Zhou dynasty's camp in one fell swoop. Zhou Wuong and Jiang Shang didn't think that there would be horses this fast in the world that could catch up to their chariots. As a result, they didn't even think about covering their tracks along the way, heading straight for Mengjin. When it was close to noon, they could see the retreating chariots in the distance. Ouyang Shuo suddenly raised his hand, signaling for the troops to stop. The rapidly advancing cavalry stopped as if someone had slammed on the brakes. Wang Feng. Ouyang Shuo called for his captain. Wang Feng was already behind Ouyang Shuo, and he immediately caught up. I'm here. Come closer. The cool-looking guard captain had a puzzled look on his face. He did not know what his lord was up to this time. Ouyang Shuo whispered something into Wang Feng's ear. Wang Feng's eyes flashed with bewilderment, but he immediately recovered his cool expression. Outsiders would not be able to see anything strange, and they did not know what mission master had given him. Wang Feng returned to his position and signaled to the guards behind him. "Guards, follow me." With that, he patted the horse's back and turned into a small path. Yes, the guards quickly followed, not wasting any time. The other members of the cavalry, including Lin Yi, didn't say anything. There were rules in the army, and they didn't say anything that shouldn't be said, and they didn't ask anything that shouldn't be asked. As the commander of the army, Ouyang Shua's orders were top secret. Keep moving, and remember, capture Wu Wang and Jiangshang alive. Don't take their lives, Ouyang Shua said, worried that the cavalry might make a mistake. Yes. After a short pause, the troops continued forward and soon caught up to the chariots. The sound of hooves alerted Zhou Wuwang. Zhou Wuwang, who was already frightened, turned around and saw the approaching cavalry. He couldn't help but be shocked. The radiant armor that the 1st Battalion wore was too obvious, and it shone with a golden light under the noon sun. Zhou Wuwang could tell that this was the most brutal cavalry that had slaughtered the vassal army on the battlefield. The faces of the kings of the vassal states instantly turned pale. This group of demons had long become a nightmare that they could not get rid of. "The heavens want me dead," King Wuwang of Zhou lamented. As King Wuwang of Zhou lamented, wave after wave of arrows rained down on him. Each chariot carried 2 or 4 horses. The 2 horses in the middle were called Liangfu and were tied to the 2 sides of the shaft by a yoke. The 2 horses on the left and right were called Liangfu and were tied to the front of the chariot with leather strips. Together, they were called Si. Each chariot carried 3 armored soldiers, arranged according to left, center, and right. The armored soldier on the left held a bow and was in charge of shooting. He was the head of the chariot and was known as the left chariot, also known as the head armor. The armored soldier on the right held a dagger and was in charge of stabbing. He was also responsible for removing obstacles for the chariot and was known as the right chariot, also known as the riding armor. The one in the middle was the chariot driver, and he only carried a short sword for defense. The cavalry unit's target was mainly Che Zhua and the chariot driver. They were eliminating the enemy's long-range threat while forcing the chariot to stop. Of course, this was a great test to the cavalry's archery skills. As expected, Che Zhua and the chariot tried to retaliate as well. Unfortunately, the enemy's range was far from the compound bows of the cavalry unit. Before the arrow could hit the cavalryman, it fell to the ground. "Stop moving forward, or we'll kill you," Lin Yi shouted under Ouyang Shua's signal. Jiangshang seemed to have aged a few years. This group of Inhumans had exceeded his expectations. It wasn't that Jiangshang wasn't smart, but that he didn't have enough information. The enemy's existence had exceeded the knowledge of this era. No matter how resourceful he was, no matter how many tricks he had up his sleeves, what could he do about it? "King, stop, we can't escape," Jiangshang said bitterly. Zhou Wuwang was silent and ordered the troops to stop. Ouyang Shua led the cavalry unit and surrounded the 300 chariots. The cavalry didn't let down their guard, aiming their bows at each soldier. The slightest movement would turn him into a sieve. "Put down your weapons." Ouyang Shua continued to pressure. The soldiers' faces were pale as they looked at their king helplessly. Zhou Wuwang didn't even dare look at his men in the eye and gestured for them to do as they were told. The soldiers could only throw down their spears or bows, completely giving up on resisting. Now, these people were lambs waiting to be slaughtered by Ouyang Shua. Jiangshang stood on the chariot without a trace of fear on his face. He sternly said, "You must not be a nobody. Why don't you tell us your name so that we can die with clarity?" Ouyang Shua nodded. Under the protection of Lin Yi and the other generals, he walked out of the crowd. "We are from the Shang dynasty. We are the representatives of the Inhumans. We are under the orders of the Shang king to capture you. Surrender now." What kind of person was Jiangshang? Ouyang Shua's actions were strange. He obviously could have killed them directly, but he chose to play this trick of persuading them to surrender. He must have some ulterior motives. He made up his mind. Perhaps there was still a chance. The Shang king is licentious, cruel, and warmongering. You are a young hero. Why are you working for such a tyrant? Ouyang Shuo smiled. You must be joking. We're just serving our own masters. Ouyang Shuo didn't admit or deny Jiang Shang's accusation. Serving their own masters had already made his stance clear. Jiang Shang paused. He knew that Ouyang Shuo wasn't easy to fool. He didn't beat around the bush and ask directly, "What are you trying to do? Why don't you tell us? We are all going to die soon. What are you afraid of?" Sure enough, he was a utilitarian, going straight to the point. Ouyang Shuo cupped his fists. I dare not hide anything from you. I am here on behalf of you. Oh, I'm just an old man. How can I trouble you? Jiang Shang's words were sarcastic. Great-grandfather, you should know that us mutants can't stay here for long. I admire your wisdom and would like to invite you to follow me back so that I can listen to your teachings every day. Ouyang Shuo made his intentions clear. Jiang Shang was unmoved. A loyal subject does not serve two masters. Moreover, you are an enemy of Western Zhou. Ouyang Shuo shook his head. You don't have to be in a hurry to decline. You can make your decision after hearing my conditions. There is no need to say anything else. I will not agree to any of your conditions. Jiang Shang was determined. Ouyang Shuo wasn't disappointed. Jiang Shang was only putting on a show to gain more bargaining chips for his side. He wasn't really refusing to comply. He smiled and said, What if my condition is to let King Wu go? Jiang Shang was moved. King Wu was his lifeline. He didn't care if he died, but he couldn't watch the bloodline of the Western Zhou royal family die out. If that was the case, how would he have the face to see the dead king win? Are you saying that you will let King Wu go if I am willing to follow you? Jiang Shang wanted to confirm. Ouyang Shuo nodded. That's right. What about the others? Jiang Shang wasn't satisfied with saving King Wu alone. Ouyang Shuo smiled coldly. Great-grandfather, letting King Wu go is the most I can do. I will be reprimanded by the Shang King when I return. Please don't make things difficult for me. As soon as Ouyang Shuo finished speaking, everyone's faces turned deathly pale, with the exception of King Wu. There was no doubt that Ouyang Shuo's words had sentenced them to death. Jiang Shang was disappointed. He knew that Ouyang Shuo wasn't a merciful person. In that case, I can agree to your conditions. However, I am disheartened and have no interest in becoming an official. Even if I follow you, I will just be a hermit. Ouyang Shuo was excited about the first half of the sentence. The second half made Ouyang Shuo smile bitterly. He knew that a saint-level historical figure like him wouldn't be so easily subdued. If one were to say that Ouyang Shuo wasn't moved by Jiang Shang at all, then it would definitely be a lie. He was just choosing another method to achieve his ambition in a disguised form. Unexpectedly, Gaia didn't let him get what he wanted. Ouyang Shuo sighed inwardly. No matter what, he had gained something. As long as Jiang Shang agreed to settle in Shanhai County, his status and influence could attract other historical figures to settle in Shanhai County, even if he didn't become an official. As for the other benefits, it would depend on how he operated. System notification. Congratulations to player, who says that has nothing for subduing the saint-level historical figure Jiang Shang. Because Jiang Shang was forced to agree, the conditions for subduing are insufficient. Jiang Shang will live in seclusion in Shanhai County and refuse to become an official. System notification. Congratulations to player, who says that has nothing for becoming the first lord to subdue a saint-level historical figure. Special reward. 4,000 achievement points, 20,000 reputation points. This was a pleasant surprise. Ouyang Shuo calmed himself down and ordered people to separate Jiang Shang's chariot. Ouyang Shuo was worried that Jiang Shang's body wouldn't be able to withstand the jolting of a warhorse. As for King Wu's chariot, it was naturally allowed to pass. However, King Wang of Zhou was stubborn and was unwilling to leave. He said loudly, To abandon my prime minister, my people, and my allies, to live on my own is not something I can do. I would rather die than submit. A sense of desolation pervaded everyone's heart. On the chariot, Jiang Shang bowed to King Wu and said, Your Majesty, it is your duty to preserve the royal bloodline of the Zhou people. Don't let down the people's trust in you. Zhou Wu sighed. Prime Minister, if there's no Prime Minister, what will I do even if I return? The young King Wu felt lost about the future of Western Zhou. There's still the Duke of Zhou in the country who can assist you. Your Majesty, don't be discouraged. Jiang Shang continued to persuade him. Your Majesty. All the Zhou soldiers suddenly knelt down and pleaded for their king to leave. Seeing such a scene, Ouyang Shuo wasn't indifferent. However, this was war. As the instigator of this war, he naturally had to be mentally prepared to accept defeat. Zhou Wu let out a long sigh. He finally boarded the chariot and left. To be continued. Chapter 209. After Zhou Wuwang's departure, the remaining people looked hopeless. Let's fight them to the death. Someone picked up his weapon, unwilling to be slaughtered. Ouyang Shuo had already taken Jiang Shang's chariot far away from the battlefield. Lin Yi raised his hand expressionlessly. Fire! Arrows rained down from the sky, drowning the remaining soldiers. Not a single one was spared. After that, Lin Yi ordered his men to check them one by one to make sure they didn't slip through. Other than that, the soldiers cut off the heads of the kings, wrapped them in cloth, and tied them to the backs of the horses. They were going to bring them back to Chaoga. This was what King Xian had told them before they left. Jiang Shang sat in the chariot, sighing when he heard the screams behind him. The army passed by Mai at 3 in the afternoon. The army had already followed King Xian back to Chaoga. Ouyang Shuo didn't stay in Mai and went straight back to Chaoga. After returning to Chaoga, Ouyang Shuo met up with the members of the Alliance of Mountains and Seas and rushed to the palace to report to King Xian. At the same time, he received his reward. The Battle of Mai had officially ended, and the announcement sounded. Battle announcement. The Battle of Mai has officially concluded. Congratulations to the Shang dynasty for successfully reversing the course of history. Every Shang dynasty lord will be rewarded with 500 achievement points and 50 contribution points on top of the original amount. Friendly reminder, the additional contribution points will not be counted in the contribution ranking. Gaia's reward system was very reasonable. There was a base reward of 500 achievement points, ensuring that every player in the faction would benefit. There was also a percentage of contribution points, ensuring that the more the lords contributed, the more rewards they would get. There was a tiered distribution, so they didn't have to share everything. Finally, the additional contribution points would not be counted in the contribution ranking. This was to ensure fairness between the two factions. At the very least, the losing side wouldn't lose the chance to fight for the contribution ranking. Battle announcement. The Battle of Makino has officially ended. Players will now receive additional contribution points based on how much they contributed to the battle and how much they contributed to the faction. Subsequently, the sound of the system notification resounded in Ouyang Shuo's ears. Announcement. Player not have clothes. The representative of the Shang faction has contributed 100,000 crossbow machines to form an army of slave crossbowmen. Ambushed the Zhou faction's command system in the southern outskirts of Mai. Good command in the final battle. Pursued the remaining enemies and annihilated them. You have made great contributions and will be rewarded with an additional 80,000 contribution points. The key to the Battle of Mai was the formation of the slave crossbowmen, which was completely led by Ouyang Shuo. With a flip of his hand, he could summon clouds and rain with a flip of his hand. He had successfully turned the tables, and the effect he played was even greater than during the Zhuolu battle. In return, Ouyang Shuo's additional combat contribution points reached the total of the Zhuolu battle. Such a good opportunity would be hard to come by in the future, apart from the Battle of Mai. After calculating all the players' additional contribution points, the final contribution ranking was officially established. Rank, name, contribution points, first place, how do I have no clothes, 240,000 points, second place, White Birch, 55,000 points, third place, Caged Phoenix, 50,000 points, fourth place, Magnolia Moon, 45,000 points, fifth place, Dragon Seeking Point, 42,000 points, sixth place, Emperor Dust, 40,000 points, seventh place, Siege Lion, 32,000 points. 8th place, Tao Wu, 30,000 points. 9th place, Blossoming Flame, 25,000 points. 10th place, Lord Chun Shin, 15,000 points. The Alliance of Mountains and Seas won once again. Ouyang Shua's contribution points made everyone despair. In the end, Ouyang Shua obtained a total of 41,000 contribution points, not including the 4,000 contribution points he obtained from subduing Jiangshang. At this point, Ouyang Shua's contribution points had reached 85,800, and he was promoted to a third-rank marquis. He was only one step away from the 102,400 contribution points required for a second-rank marquis. With Zhang Liao's help, White Birch once again suppressed Feng Qiuhuang and became the runner-up. She and Feng Qiuhuang also successfully became first-rank earls with the contribution points they obtained in this battle, clearing the biggest obstacle for their territory to become a third-rank county. Apart from that, Magnolia Moon directly skipped third-rank earls and was promoted to second-rank earls. This made her extremely happy. Magnolia Moon's contribution points mainly came from Moot Guying's command. The Dragon-Seeking Point and the Siege Lion were promoted to second-rank earls and third-rank earls respectively. After these two battles, the Alliance of Mountains and Seas members' nobility ranks shot up like a rocket. Lord Chunshin and the others had completely missed the opportunity to use the Battle of Mai to promote their nobility ranks. If their territory wanted to become a third-rank county, they would have to wait for a long time. They might even have to wait until the next battle. Di Chun, on the other hand, managed to escape and obtain more than 6,000 contribution points. However, he was still a distance away from becoming a second-rank earl. The Battle of Mai was an important turning point. Lin led a squadron of cavalry and escorted Ouyang Shua to the palace. As for Jiangshang, in order to not attract the attention of other lords, Ouyang Shua arranged for him to be guarded outside the city. Ouyang Shua didn't enter the palace immediately. An hour later, Wang Feng returned with his personal guards and met up with Ouyang Shua at the palace gates. Ouyang Shua told Lin to return to the camp and hand over the spoils of war to his personal guards. He then led his personal guards into the palace under the guidance of the palace guards. The Shang King, King Xian, received Ouyang Shua in the main hall. Ouyang Shua didn't waste any time and ordered his personal guards to hand over the heads of the various lords. Other than that, Wang Feng personally handed over a head to the inner guard. The inner guard opened it to reveal Zhou Wuwang's head. It turned out that Ouyang Shua had planned to use Zhou Wuwang's life to force Jiangshang to submit. However, he didn't want to affect King Xian's final reward just because he didn't complete the mission. Moreover, he didn't want to give up the 20,000 contribution points for killing Zhou Wuwang. Therefore, Ouyang Shua had arranged for Wang Feng to rush to the front of the group through the small path to intercept Zhou Wuwang, who had been released, and capture him all at once. Even Ouyang Shua himself felt that it was despicable to deceive everyone. Strictly speaking, Ouyang Shua didn't break his promise to Jiangshang. He only promised Jiangshang to let Zhou Wuwang go, but he didn't promise that he wouldn't send people to kill him. King Xian was overjoyed when he saw Zhou Wuwang's head. Good. I finally got my revenge. Well done. You didn't disappoint me. Ouyang Shua took the opportunity to say, King, please agree to a small condition of mine. What condition? King Xian was in a good mood. Please temporarily seal the news of Zhou Wuwang's death and announce it after I leave. Why is that? King Xian didn't understand. Ouyang Shua said embarrassedly, because Jiangshang has agreed to return with me. I don't want him to know about Zhou Wuwang's death to avoid unnecessary trouble. King Xian was a smart person. He naturally understood what Ouyang Shua meant. Fortunately, it would only take a day. Okay, I promise you. King Xian was straightforward. He turned to look at Eli, who was standing at the side of the hall, and said, I won't go back on my words. I'll leave General Eli to you. I hope you can put him in an important position. Ouyang Shua nodded. Thank you, King. Eli understood and walked to Ouyang Shua. He knelt on one knee and said solemnly, Eli greets my lord. Ouyang Shua hurriedly helped Eli up. General, please rise. At the same time, Ouyang Shuo heard a system notification. System notification. Congratulations to player not wearing for successfully subduing the emperor-level historical figure, Eli. Ouyang Shuo took the opportunity to check Eli's attributes. Name, Eli, Emperor level, Dynasty, Shang Dynasty identity, Shanghai County General, occupation, Special Class General loyalty, 80 Commander, 75, Martial Power, 98 Intelligence, 50 Politics, 25 Specialty, Courage, increases troops attack power by 20, Blood Fiend, increases troops morale by 40, Earth-shaking, increases troops defense by 20. Technique, Desolate Tiger Sutra, equipment, bronze armor, evaluation. A famous general of the Shang dynasty, the ancestor of the Qin dynasty. He was famous for his courage. He had the strength to fight rhinoceroses and tigers. They were both special-class generals. Compared to Shi Wan Sui, the only thing Eli lacked was equipment. When he returned, Ouyang Shuo would forge weapons and equipment for Eli. He would look for a mount and completely equip this fierce general. King Xian's reward for Ouyang Shuo was not over yet. King Xian personally handed Ouyang Shuo a brocade pouch and said, "My dynasty believes in ghosts and gods and prays for their protection. There are 5 incense essence pills in the brocade pouch. They are condensed from sacrifices to ghosts and gods and are very precious. They have incredible effects on all kinds of temples. I will now give them to you." Ouyang Shuo was stunned. He did not expect there to be such a special item. He accepted it respectfully. King Shang of Shang continued, "Let's go. Follow me out of the hall and take a look at the last reward that I have prepared for you." With that, he walked out of the hall. Ouyang Shuo followed behind King Xian. He was very curious. What kind of reward was it that he had to go outside the hall to receive it? He guessed that it should be a very large item. Sure enough, King Xian pointed to a huge bronze square tripod in the square outside the hall and said, "The square tripod is a symbol of power. I will now give it to you as a reward for your achievements." Ouyang Shuo looked at it. The tripod had a rectangular mouth, a short edge, square lips, upright ears, straight abdomen, flat bottom, and cylindrical hollow feet. The 4 sides of the mouth and the corners were decorated with beast patterns and thunder patterns. The bottom of the waist was decorated with milk, and the top of the feet was eye-catching. Ouyang Shuo did not understand the specific use of the tripod. He put it in his storage pouch and bowed to King Xian. "Thank you for the reward, Your Majesty." Then Ouyang Shuo brought his personal guards out of the palace to meet up with the troops. They then teleported away. To be continued. Chapter 210. When Ouyang Shuo walked out of the portal, a system announcement rang in his ears. System announcement. The Battle of Mai has officially ended. Important historical figures of the Shang dynasty and Western Zhou have been added to the game. Please explore on your own. Another system announcement rang, shocking the entire world. World announcement. Congratulations to China server player Not Wui for becoming the first lord to become a marquis in the world. He will be given the title of Marquis of Lianzhou and 20,000 reputation points. Rewards will be given in the King's City. Ouyang Shuo knew that only the top 10 lords in the world who became Marquis could be given a name by Gaia. After the 10th rank, there were ordinary titles without any specific titles. Although being bestowed the title of Marquis didn't have any additional bonuses, it was still a supreme honor, enough to make people go crazy. In the Alliance channel, Baihua and the others, who had returned before Ouyang Shuo, congratulated him. "Wow, boss, that's so cool." Another global champion, Siege Lion, said with admiration, "Brother Wui, Gaia, giving us the title of Marquis of Lianzhou, makes us lords lose face. Those who didn't know better would think that we were your vassals." Milan complained about Gaia's bias. "Wui, when will Shanghai County be promoted to Shanghai County? Don't leave us behind too much," Baihua and Feng Qiuhuang teased. "You two work hard. You might be able to get spot too." Baihua and Feng Qiuhuang were already first-level earls. If the next battle was as big as this, it might be possible. Thank you, Wui, for your help, Baiwa said with a smile, evidently very satisfied with the battle. Baiwa knew that Lin Yi wasn't as good as Zhang Liao, but he could still handle a battle like this. Ouyang Shuo, on the other hand, still appointed Zhang Liao as the general of the cavalry. It would be a lie to say that he wasn't grateful. Yeah, following our leader will fill our stomachs, Xuanlong, acupuncture point added. All hail the leader. Siege Lion came out to cause trouble again. Only Feng Qiuhuang wasn't very excited. During the battle, Ouyang Shuo had already communicated with Feng Qiuhuang about the information Baiyan had given him. Feng Qiuhuang seemed to be in despair when she heard the news. She felt like she had been abandoned. Fortunately, Ouyang Shuo comforted her. No matter what, she was still the lord of Luo Feng County, and this was a fact that couldn't be changed. Even if they weren't trusted by the clan, they would be the ones to leave, not Feng Qiuhuang. On this matter, Feng Qiuhuang was definitely not fighting alone. The Mountain and Sea Alliance was her strongest backing. Ouyang Shuo's consolation helped Feng Qiuhuang calm down. She had already decided that after the battle, she would have a showdown with her family. Since they no longer trusted each other, there was naturally no need for them to get together. After a short celebration, Ouyang Shuo turned off the Alliance channel with the excuse that he was busy. During the Battle of Mai, only 2,500 of the 3,000 soldiers from Shanhai County returned alive. The heavy armored troops of the mountain barbarians suffered the greatest losses. They were at the forefront of the battle against the Western Zhou's brave Tiger Army and their elite soldiers. Although they had the upper hand, killing 1,000 enemies came with 800 casualties. In the end, 300 of the 1,000 barbarian heavy infantry soldiers were killed. Considering the uniqueness of the barbarian warriors, Ouyang Shuo ordered the military office to add the barbarian warriors from the Poolwater County City Defense Camp and the Friendship County Defense Camp into the mixed brigade. The city defense camp would then recruit local soldiers to make up the numbers. Ouyang Shuo's actions were equivalent to clarifying the hierarchy in the Shanhai County Army. Field troops like the Mixed Brigade and the Vanguard Battalion had a higher status than the city defense camp. They belonged to the first rank. The various city defense camps belonged to the second rank. The reserve troops and the Wolf Mountain Garrison Camp, which were not officially organized, belonged to the third rank. When the time was ripe in the future, there would be differences in the pay of different ranks, including the distribution of weapons and equipment. The most advanced weapons and armor would be given priority to the first-rank troops. Ouyang Shuo ordered the Mixed Brigade and the Vanguard Battalion to immediately return to their respective camps. He brought Jiang Shang and Yi Lai, the two newcomers, back to the Lord's Mansion. On the way, Ouyang Shuo pointed at the Southwest University China Hall opposite the plaza and introduced the general situation of the Southwest University China Hall to Jiang Shang. He said tentatively, "I dare not stop you if you want to live in seclusion. As the saying goes, a big hermit lives in the city while a small hermit lives in the wilderness. Why don't you just live in seclusion at the Southwest University China Hall? The environment there's tranquil and the atmosphere is strong. There is also no filthy atmosphere of officialdom. It is the best place to live in seclusion. What do you think?" Ouyang Shuo suggested this because he wanted Jiang Shang to teach at the Southwest University China Hall. Secondly, he didn't want Jiang Shang to live in seclusion in the mountains in the suburbs. That way, he wouldn't have the chance to invite him out. Jiang Shang was in low spirits and didn't comment on Ouyang Shuo's suggestion. Fortunately, when they returned to the main map, the system automatically corrected the historical figures. Jiang Shang had a deeper understanding of the game like Fan Zhongyan and the others. He was no longer limited to his own era and had a broader vision. He knew the rise and fall of dynasties. Ouyang Shuo wasn't discouraged. He brought the two to the meeting hall of the Lord's Mansion and told the clerk, by Nanpu, to invite the directors over. There were important guests. After exchanging greetings, Ouyang Shuo asked Fan Zhongyan to take care of Jiang Shang. He asked Fan Zhongyan to take Jiang Shang to the territory, especially to the Southwest University China Hall, before deciding on a place to live in seclusion. General Eli, what kind of weapons do you like? Ouyang Shuo asked. Eli smiled. I have never used any weapons other than spears and dagger axes. Ouyang Shuo was stunned. He suddenly remembered the weapons used by Dian Wei in history. Dian Wei used a pair of iron halberds. The halberd in his left hand weighed 39 kilograms, while the halberd in his right hand weighed 41 kilograms. The halberd was a combination of dagger axes and spears. It shouldn't be a problem for Eli to use it. Ouyang Shuo turned to Ge Hongliang, the director of military affairs, and said, Director Ge, arrange for the weapons workshop to make a pair of iron halberds for General Eli. Also, arrange for the armor workshop to make a set of armor for the general. Be it weapons or armor. Ask for the general's opinion. We must make sure that the general can use it. Yes, Ge Hongliang answered. Ouyang Shuo had already made arrangements for Eli, but it would have to wait until the expansion of the territory. For the time being, Ouyang Shuo arranged for Eli to stay in the barracks in the city so that he could get used to it. After making arrangements for the two, Ouyang Shuo finally had time to check the items that the king of Shang had given him. He first took out the brocade bag and took out an incense essence pill to check its attributes. Incense essence pill, the condensed essence of ghosts and gods. After use, it can increase the number of incense offerings in the ancestral temple. Ouyang Shuo immediately thought of the hidden Mazu temple that was still in a sealed state. If he wanted to remove the seal on the Mazu temple, he would need incense offerings. It was a perfect match. Ouyang Shuo got up and left the Lord's mansion. He walked to the square and took out the Shang cauldron from his storage bag to check its attributes. Name, Shang cauldron, purple gold. Attributes, ghost god's protection, increases the territory's defense by 20. Supreme nobility, indicates the Lord's prestige by 20. Four Directions Cauldron, increases the army's combat power by 20. Remarks, this is a top-grade Shang Dynasty square cauldron. It is a symbol of nobility and power. It can be used for sacrifices. Ouyang Shuo took a deep breath. He didn't expect this Shang cauldron to be a purple gold item and have such crazy attributes, especially the Four Directions cauldron. It could increase the army's combat power, not just attack power or defense power. It was an all-around improvement. From now on, even if the army of Shanghai County was the same in terms of unit type, level, and equipment, their combat power would be stronger than the armies of other forests. How could Ouyang Shuo not be excited? Ouyang Shuo had already decided to build an altar in front of the Yellow Emperor Shrine in the east to hold the Shang cauldron. Ouyang Shuo put the Shang cauldron back into his storage bag and rode his cyan beetle horse towards the Mazu Temple in the North District. The suspension bridge at the north gate of the core district had been removed and the 3 stone arch bridges had been built. After passing through the stone arch bridges, he arrived at the North District. As far as the eye could see, the business district was bustling with people and carriages. The largest theaters, tea houses, and restaurants in the territory were all built in the business district, competing with each other for beauty. As for the carpentry workshops and blacksmiths, they no longer had the qualifications to stand on the business district. They were all built in the business district. Because the theater was generated by the system, it had its own theatrical troupe. According to Binger, the performances were very good. It was a pity that Lord Ouyang Shuo hadn't had the chance to go to the theater to listen to a play. It was quite tragic. The business district now was basically filled with all kinds of service shops. It had become the largest consumer area. Even at night, it was brightly lit and bustling with people. It was an indescribable prosperity. Ouyang Shuo naturally didn't have the mood to stroll around. He immediately turned left and entered the residential district. The residential district that occupied a large area was only a third of it. The streets were paved with blue stone, dividing the residential district into blocks. Each block had rows of blue stone and blue-tiled southern courtyards. In order to facilitate management, the administrative office had set up a Li Zheng in each block. The Mazu Temple was placed on the riverbank of the inner city. Ouyang Shuo rushed to the Mazu Temple. The guards that accompanied him started to seal the temple, forbidding the commoners from entering. The worshippers inside the temple were also politely asked to leave by the guards. It wasn't that Ouyang Shuo was putting on airs as a lord. It was just that he couldn't let commoners see him using the incense essence pill. Ouyang Shuo let the guards walk outside the temple and walked into the Mazu temple alone. The current Mazu temple had been expanded. Its size was 5 to 6 times bigger than before. It was divided into 3 halls. Ouyang Shuo walked in front of the Mazu statue and took out an incense essence pill. As expected, a system notification rang out. System notification. Player Yu Wui has an incense essence pill that can unlock Mazu Temple. Do you want to use it? Friendly reminder. Mazu statue can only use 1 incense essence pill at most. Repeated uses are ineffective. Use. The incense essence pill flew out from Ouyang Shuo's hand and turned into a ray of white light before entering the statue. System notification. Mazu statue has been nourished by the incense essence pill. Its godly power has increased greatly. Mazu Temple's unlock progress has increased to 60%. Player, please continue to work hard. Ouyang Shuo sighed. In the end, he was unable to accomplish the task in one go. To be continued. Chapter 211. P.S. 300 monthly tickets plus updates. Thank you for your support. After leaving Mother Ancestor Temple, Ouyang Shuo turned around and headed towards Xing Wang Temple and Earth God Temple. As Mazu Temple could only use 1 pill, there were still 4 of the 5 incense essence pills that the king of Shang, DXN, had given Ouyang Shuo. Ouyang Shuo wanted to see what kind of effect it would have if he used other temples. He first went to the Xing Wang Temple and took out an incense essence pill. As expected, a system notification popped up. System notification. Player say you have no clothes is in possession of incense essence pill. Do you want to use it? Use. With a swoosh, the incense essence pill turned into a white light and entered the city god statue. System notification. The Xing Wang statue has been nourished by the incense essence pill, and the Xing Wang temple has gained a new building property. Monitor the people. Reduces the territory crime rate by 30%. So that's how it is. It's actually a derivative building characteristic, which is very precious. Ouyang Shuo persisted and rushed to the Earth Temple. He consumed another incense essence pill. System update. The Earth God statue has been nourished by the incense essence pill. The Earth Temple has derived a building property. Harvest of 5 grains. Increase the production of crops in the territory by 10%. In the end, Ouyang Shuo arrived at the Yellow Emperor's shrine, but the result disappointed him. The incense essence pill was ineffective against the Yellow Emperor's shrine. He speculated that one reason was that the Yellow Emperor's temple was defined as an ancestral temple, so it needed to maintain the purity of sacrifices, so it was impossible to use incense essence pills to increase the number of incense offerings. The second reason was that the Yellow Emperor's temple was already a complete hidden building, so there was no room for further improvement. Ouyang Shuo was not discouraged. He still had 2 incense essence pills left. Once the county became a grade 3 city, the Confucian Temple and the Martial Temple would appear. In the afternoon, the Supreme Court sent an envoy to Shanghai County to officially reward Ouyang Shuo, the Marquis of Lian Province, on behalf of the Imperial Court. Upon receiving the notice, the Department of Culture and Education set up an incense table in the Lord's Mansion to welcome the envoy of the Imperial Court. Ouyang Shuo led the civil and military officials to receive the imperial edict. In accordance with the will of the heavens, the emperor decreed, "How can a mutant be without clothes?" Descending into the wilderness, the heavens bestowed a great responsibility upon him, cutting through thistles and thorns, sweeping away the evil. His meritorious service was outstanding. His prestige spread throughout the world, and his name spread far and wide. He was specially conferred the title of Marquis of Lian Province to show his meritorious service. End of the Emperor. Thank you for your grace, my lord. Ouyang Shuo kowtowed in gratitude. The rewards of the imperial court consisted of two parts. One was the conferment of nobility, and the other was the reward of gold, silver, and jewels. The rewards brought by the emissary of the imperial court were mainly four items. The first item was a feudal vassal seal that symbolized the status of the Marquis of Lianzhou. The seal was emitting a golden red light with golden flower patterns. It weighed about 300 grams and had a side length of 36 centimeters. It had a crouching tiger button and a tiger head lid that looked like the character Wang. There was a small hole at the top of the seal arm. At the bottom of the big seal, there were four characters engraved. Seal of the Marquis of Lianzhou. The vassal seal would replace the Lord's seal and become Ouyang Shua's personal seal. The second item was the geomancy map of Lian Province, which symbolized the fief of the Marquis of Lian Province. It was a panoramic map of the Lian Province basin. The geomancy map of Lian Province was drawn in great detail. Not only were the mountains and rivers drawn, but even the various mineral resources were clearly marked on the map. It was probably drawn by Gaia. Awarding the geomancy map of Lianzhou did not mean that the Lianzhou basin would be given to Ouyang Shua as a fief. It could only be said that Ouyang Shua had become the nominal lord of the Lianzhou basin. He had a righteous cause and was a cut above others. The third item was a feudal vassal's ceremonial attire. It was used to offer sacrifices to the deceased and to offer sacrifices. It was paired with a 7-colored crown and black robe. The robe was embroidered with 3 symbols: Hua insect, fire, and Zomi. The robe was embroidered with 4 symbols: embroidered seaweed, pink rice, fan, and fu. The fourth item was the red bow and arrow, which symbolized the Marquis of Lian Province's power of conquest. It was a vermilion bow and 100 vermilion arrows. With the red bow and arrow, Ouyang Shua's conquest of Lian Province was a matter of course. No one could say anything. The above 4 items together established Ouyang Shua's status as the Marquis of Lian Province. It set him apart from the other feudal lords and made him an influential feudal lord in the wilderness. Among them, the geomancy map of Lian Province and the red bow and arrow were immediately enshrined in the Yellow Emperor Shrine after they were bestowed. Apart from these 4 items, the imperial court also awarded him 100 bolts of silk, a box of jewels, a box of jade, a box of gold and silver, 5 fine horses, and a luxurious carriage. 5 horses pulling the carriage was the etiquette of the feudal lords. After the imperial court's special envoy received the reward from Sushuda, he immediately returned it to Dali without any delay. The imperial court's reward to Ouyang Shua caused the entire territory to be in an uproar. The people felt honored. Ouyang Shua ordered Zisu to store the imperial court's rewards into the Lord's Mansion's treasury. A box of gold totaled 10,000 gold coins, which was taken away by Ouyang Shua. A box of silver totaled 10,000 silver coins, which was allocated to the Lord's Mansion's expenses. Amidst the clamor, it was already evening. After accompanying Bing'er for dinner, Ouyang Shua returned to his room and began his unshakable cultivation. Ever since he migrated, Ouyang Shua had made the evenings his fixed time for cultivation. Gaia's first year, August 16th, Shanghai County welcomed another promotion. Ouyang Shua walked into the meeting hall and silently chanted the words, "Territory promotion." A white light flashed, and a golden stone tablet slowly rose from the ground in the middle of the meeting hall. He pressed his right hand on the front of the stone tablet, and the system notification sounded. System notification, testing Shanghai County's promotion conditions. Condition 1. The population has reached 50,000. The maximum population limit has been met. Due to Operation Lightning and the settlement of the players, the population of Shanghai County had greatly increased. It had reached the maximum population of 50,000 a month in advance. Condition 2. All basic construction has been completed. The requirements have been met. The only troublesome part of a Level 2 county was the Qiyuan. After the arrival of the team of experts, an old man who loved Go in real life was temporarily appointed as the Qiyuan's director. Condition 3. The feudal lord's title is at least a first-grade earl. The requirements have been met. The requirements for a first-grade earl's title had stumped many feudal lords. It was reported that Danyang County, Red Blood County, and Handan County had been promoted to Level 2 county. Unfortunately, they were still far from reaching Level 3. System notification. Congratulations to player who says nothing for establishing Shanghai County. All the promotion conditions have been met. Do you want to upgrade? Upgrade. On the stone tablet, a golden light shot into the sky and exploded in the sky. It turned into a golden halo and spread in all directions. The halo extended to the new border of the territory and disappeared again. System announcement. Congratulations to player who says nothing for becoming the first feudal lord in the China server to be promoted to Level 3 county. The reward is 2,200 achievement points. System announcement. Congratulations to player who says nothing for becoming the first feudal lord in the China server to be promoted to Level 3 county. The reward is 2,200 achievement points. System announcement. Congratulations to player who says nothing for becoming the first feudal lord in the China server to be promoted to Level 3 county. The reward is 2,200 achievement points. Shanghai County's promotion was a matter of course. It no longer piqued the interest of the players. On the other hand, Ouyang Shua's appointment as the Marquis of Lianzhou was still a hot topic among the players. System announcement. Congratulations to player who says nothing for leveling up his territory to Level 3 county. 3 basic buildings will be randomly selected. Player may choose one of them. System announcement. 3 buildings have been randomly selected. They're the brothel, the bell and drum tower, and the martial temple. Please choose. I choose the brothel. System announcement. The building is being automatically generated. Please check for yourself. With a flash of white light, the golden stone tablet sank into the ground again. Ouyang Shua took the opportunity to check Shanghai County's attributes. Territory, Shanghai County, Level 3 county, feudal lord, who says nothing, Level 3 marquis, title, world's #1 county, increases territory popularity by 30, popular support, 95 out of 100 public security, 94 out of 100 territory population, 50,000/100,000 refugee spawn rate, 300 per day, territory area, 10,000 square kilometers, territory characteristics, slight politics index, 68 out of 100 determines administrative efficiency, affects popular support, economy index, 60 out of 100 determines trade, prosperity, affects tax revenue, culture index, 65 out of 100 determines education development, affects the quality of residence, military index, 60 out of 100 determines military strength, affects stable relationships, subsidiary territories, Beihai County, Qiushui County, Yi County list of basic construction buildings, frowny face brothel, a place of prostitution, construction requirement, geisha, brothel, building blueprint, 8,000 units of wood for 1,000 units of green bricks, 5,000 units of stone. Construction time, 10 days. Note, the building is automatically generated. Bell and Drum Tower, the general name for the bell and drum towers. Construction requirement, bell and drum tower blueprint, 8,000 units of wood, 8,000 units of green bricks, 10,000 units of stone. Construction time, 15 days. Confucian Temple, a temple built to worship the loyal officials of the past. Construction requirement, Confucian Temple blueprint, 8,000 units of wood, 8,000 units of green bricks for 1,000 units of stone. Construction time, 10 days. Martial Temple, a temple built to worship the loyal generals of the past. Construction requirement, Martial Temple blueprint, 8,000 units of wood, 8,000 units of green bricks for 1,000 units of stone. Construction time, 10 days. Academy, an ancient educational institution in China. Construction requirement, Academy blueprint, 10,000 units of wood, 10,000 units of green bricks, 8,000 units of stone. Construction time, 15 days. Note, Southwest University China Hall already has a similar building, so there is no need to repeat it. Compared to a second-tier county, a third-tier county's population limit and territory area would double. According to the normal spawn rate, it would take 167 days to break the population limit again. Of course, it would be impossible to become a first-tier county city with just the basic requirements. Every time the territory was upgraded, there would be a strict test. Upgrading to a township required the territory's index, while upgrading to a county city required the territory's defense and military strength. Ouyang Shuo had no idea what additional requirements were required to upgrade to a county city. County cities were considered high-class territories, so the Lord would not easily disclose the information about the promotion on the forum. Therefore, as an adventurer in his previous life, Ouyang Shuo only knew a little about it. To be continued. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.